Test, test. Ooh, we do have sound. The trick is not to move the table. So as you guys start to trickle in here, we have an interesting topic for today. I hope it is. I hope you like it. I have gotten myself set up with my saltwater vat, which is done. Hello, TJ. Yeah, we've been doing one stream after another, week after week. I've had a few clubs reach out saying, can you come speak? And I was like, no. Because they say, you know, can you come on this Saturday? I'm like, that's when I do my live stream. So I do have a trip that's almost booked that's going to happen, but it takes place on a Sunday. And that way I can do the stream and then go to the airport. So that is the plan for one day next month. And that'll be heading up to Boston. But today's conversation is going to be about the water change station that I've been talking about for so long. And kept saying, I need to do it, I need to do it. Finally got it done. And it was just really a matter of ordering in the right parts so I could move on with the project. I hate starting something and having to make multiple trips to Home Depot. I try to always buy everything in advance, and that way I can just start plumbing it, however long that takes, and then 4 or 5 hours later I'm done. And that's pretty much what happened this time. So that was nice, but it still took some time because I had to actually clean this container first. And it was, it had about this much water in the bottom. The water was super, super old. I wouldn't use it for anything. I couldn't use it for anything because the pump that was connected to this container was dead. So what I ended up doing was I chose to use the Vectra M2 pump as my new circulation pump. When I first talked to Ecotech about this so long ago, they had actually recommended the S pump, which is their little tiny one. And it sat like a hedgehog in my hand. And I thought, there is no way this little guy can do that giant thing over there. It just seemed like it was a disaster waiting to happen. And if I were to spend the money on that pump, and well, actually, I bought it. But had I hooked it all up, did all the plumbing, and it didn't work out, I'd have to redo everything because that pump uses smaller plumbing. Bigger pumps need bigger plumbing, so I kind of just wanted to do it right. So my goal was to hook up the M2. But I needed time to do this project, and I just never seemed to have that available time. I try to work on customer orders first, squeeze in little things for my reef in the middle, and of course maintain the tank, which I have to do no matter what. But to tackle something like that, that's going to take a day or two. I put it off and I put it off and I put it off, and you guys know I've put it off forever. So that was why last year we only had 2 water changes done out of the entire year. And this year we're going to do more. So first of all, let me tell you about this container. This container is 10 years old. I've had it, I got it off of Craigslist. And what happened was I was looking for one, and everywhere you look for a container that size, they would say, the price is, let's say, $200, $300, whatever it is. And then shipping was $200 or $300. So it was literally double what it cost to buy the container. So I wanted to drive somewhere and pick it up and avoid the shipping since it doubled the price. Now I could have just told myself, hey, the container costs $400, whatever, just move on with my life. But I was being a little bit, trying to save money, being a little bit stubborn. I just didn't like the cost of shipping and something like that because, it's big, but it's empty. It's not like it's thousands of pounds. So I ended up, someone told me in my local club, hey, why don't you check Craigslist? And I was like, never thought of it. And there was a couple of links to a couple of containers. And this one actually came from a vodka distillery. And the guy had several of them for sale. And when I showed up, it was about an hour's drive. And when I showed up, he said, how many do you want? I was like, I want one. Why would I want more than one? He said, you need one for RO water, you need one for salt water. And I disagreed completely because we never, ever, ever need a ton of RO water. What we do need is a ton of salt water. If something goes wrong, no one ever says, thank God I had RODI on hand. No, actually what you oftentimes hear is, oh my God, I'm out of salt. So it's so much better to have a big container, as big as you can squish into your environment, to have a lot of salt water available that you can use in an emergency. If the tank is leaking, if you're preparing for a frag swap, if you're just doing a regular water change, you have a big container behind you that can handle one or more water changes. I mean, it's nice. And this one here is really big. Matter of fact, I brought it into this room before the walls went up in this room because that was the only way to get it in. And now I cannot get it out whatsoever. It's absolutely impossible. I've tried. I tried to remove this door. I tried to remove this door frame. It still wouldn't come out. I was like, never mind. I'm just going to leave it in here. So what I've been doing in the past to clean it was I would go ahead and hook it up. I'd take muriatic acid and I put it in with those pump sprayers like they use for pest control, and I misted the walls and rinsed all the sediment that gets on the inside that makes it dirty. And I had to wear a full face mask, not just like that little cheesy piece of cloth. It's the one with the filters built in, like painters would use. And I didn't smell any muriatic acid, and I could spray all that and I could keep breathing. Now that I'm using citric acid, I'm thinking I might go that route next time. Like perhaps when the container's nearly empty, grab a garden hose, run it into this container, fill it up with a bunch of water, dump in a ton of citric acid, and just let it run. And then, bring the hose back in here and rinse it really well. That's kind of my hope. But we'll see. That's 6 to 12 months from now. I don't really care. But right now, I did want to get this guy filled up. So the other thing I ran into with this, and there's going to be a video that will be abbreviated, so, someone that's wanting to know more about this can just watch, I don't know, let's call it a 15-minute video. It's possible. I might be able to do it. And maybe I don't know, I'll try and keep it concise. But, you guys, this is story time. So the bottom of the container has a big grommet called a banjo bulkhead. And I'm talking about this thing right here. So this one here was 10 years old. By the way, we are going to be using the camera quite a bit, so if you're listening to this one, you might want to watch at least the first 45 minutes of this video instead of listening while driving. So this is a 1.5-inch banjo bulkhead I got off of Amazon. I think it cost $17. And to get the old one out, you unscrew the nut, you push the bulkhead in, you flip the entire container over to make that thing roll toward the opening at the top of this container. And this is the top of the container way up here. So I had to unscrew that lid. I had the container lying on its side. I lifted the butt end of the container upward to make the bulkhead slide toward this opening across the floor, and then I removed it. And then I dropped the new one in. So that was the first step. And then I had to tighten it down. I had to make sure that the bulkhead was secure, because once you put water in, it's a little late to start tightening things. So I want to make sure it was right. You don't use any wrenches on a bulkhead. I didn't use any wrenches on this one. I just hand tightened it with my man muscles, and that was the end of that. And then I had to start with the plumbing part. And I liked the idea of running the plumbing around the container and put the pump on the side for a couple of reasons. Number one, I didn't want to ever step into or kick the pump accidentally, especially when I have the walkboard here and I step down. Then, the other reason is that I have that plumbing that goes straight up, that goes into all those valves I'm going to talk about today. So I wanted to have all of that set up in a way where it would be clean and provide plenty of flow. And let me compare it to the last one. So I've ran this thing for 10 years, right? And in that time, I went from an 1.5-inch bulkhead to an 1.5-inch elbow, that then reduced to a reducer that went to 1 inch, and the 1 inch went through a ball valve, and then it continued to a union, and then it continued into the 1-inch intake of a Core Life pump that I had forever. I got it at one of the trade shows. It cost me $90. It made no sound at all. It just kept moving water, and that's all I cared about. But and then I went up with 1 inch as well. So basically it was 1 inch out, 1 inch up. And water just moved through the container. It worked fine. And then after a few years of that, I realized I didn't like what was happening when I would use it. What happens is, as you use up water, and now the water level is about this high, the water pouring at the very top on the other side would then be slamming into the surface, and you would hear it. And then when I used up even more water, it had to fall even further and hit the surface and keep going. The more you went down, the worse it got. And I could be watching a movie in the living room and I heard thunder. And it was this thing just thundering away. So at that point, I decided to change the plumbing at the top. I snipped it and I added 3 valves. And I'm going to switch camera lenses again. So what you can see here are 3 valves that are set up to 3 different inputs in the container. So this first valve is open right now, and the water is going up the pipe through this one valve, and it's pouring out immediately into the surface of the water, but you don't hear it because it's only dropping a couple of inches. Then if my water level drops to, let's say I take up 50, 60 gallons of water, I can close this valve, and I can open this valve, and now the water output is going to come out around this height right here, which is 180 gallons of water still left in the container. And then if I use up even more water, let's say I'm down to, let's see, 150, 40, 30, about 130 gallons of water left, I can go ahead and I can close this valve and open this valve. And now it's coming out of a pipe way, way, way down here, but it's still close enough to the surface I won't hear it. And then the final amount of water that's in there, that's just going to be what it is, and I'll just have to listen to it until it's completely empty and ready to refill. All right. And so I did that. I did that a few years ago, and it works out really well. I'm very happy with that. Then the next part of the plumbing was what's going to go into and out of the Vectra. Well, the Vectra is different than the Core Life pump. The Vectra, number one, is variable speed, and it has an input of 1.25 inches and it has an output of 1 inch. So in the case of this situation, I wanted to keep my plumbing big and only reduce it when I absolutely must. So now I got to switch the camera again for you guys. This time I'm going to put it closer to the floor. So give me a second here to kind of remove this from the tripod. And we're going to see if this works. Okay, let's see if that works. All right, so what we've got going on here is we have 1.5 inch elbow that's threaded right into the bulkhead, and I use Teflon tape and Teflon paste, and the floor is dry. So that worked out well. Then it goes into 1.5 inch Spaflex pipe, which just had a slight radius to it. Went into a 45, that's 1.5 inch pipe, 1.5 inch gate valve instead of a ball valve, only because it made the distance shorter. A ball valve would have been a much longer section right here. And I didn't want to have all that ball valve there. I wanted to have a gate valve, which I'm only going to have to open and close it occasionally. And so when I want to, I can close it all the way down, and then when I'm ready, I just have it all the way open. It takes about 11 turns to shut it completely because it is a gate valve. And then I reduce here to 1.25 inch, 1.25 inch pipe, 1.25 inch into the Vectra M2. And then out the top, I've got it at 1 inch, and then I go into a bushing that's basically the opposite of a reducer. I'm increasing it back to 1.5 inches, and I'm sending 1.5 inches up the pipe specifically so that I can have maximum flow instead of having a restricted pipe. So I'm sorry, I got my cord tangled here. So what happens here next is it goes into a T. That's 1.5 inches there, but then switches to 1 inch with a valve. This is where water's going to come out, and that's going to be for the water changes. And while this is closed, no water comes out. And then it goes up 1.5 inches as far as I could, and then I finally reduced to 1 inch when I had to. I hope all of that is making sense to you so far. I keep tripping around my own cord. So the couple things that we're talking about there is I increased the pipe size. As a matter of fact, if I could have gone 1.5 inches all the way into the pump, that would have been best because it draws in the most amount of water. And then going out into a larger diameter pipe actually increases the volume of what can come out of the pipe. Just think about this. If you had to blow through a straw with all of your lung power, you're only going to move so much air. But if you took a snorkel from, like diving, and you blew in there with all your lung power, you could send up much more air. It's the same principle with water. In a narrow pipe, less flow goes through. A larger pipe, more flow can go through. Obviously, there's a limitation. We can't just put like a 6-inch pipe on top of the pump and expect a miracle. But to increase the size, maybe even double the size of what comes out of the pump, you can have some really nice improvement. And you just do that for as much as you possibly can until you have to reduce down. And this works for return pumps too on display tanks. So if you have a pump on the floor and you're pushing up 2.5, 3 feet, you can have large pipe there and then reduce right as you go into the bulkhead, and then it's a narrower pipe and then comes out the lock line. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's actually a good thing. And I know this, I actually learned this without even knowing it. When I got my 55-gallon aquarium, I bought it used, it came with all the stuff, and the tank ran really hot, so it came with a chiller. And they were using a Mag, I think it was a Mag 5 pump. And the Mag 5 pump had 3/4 inch threads on it, and so they put 3/4 inch pipe up into the tank, and then of course it came out through the top. And the fact that that pipe was so narrow made the pump work harder because it was trying to push through this narrow pipe. Even though the threads would make you think, I should use a narrow diameter, I should match it, right? It's 3/4, so I'm gonna put 3/4 inch plumbing. It makes total sense mentally, but it was running so hard that the pump was getting even hotter, and it was to the point that the tank was actually needing a chiller to keep it cool just because the pump was running hot. Now, there was other variables causing that. I mean, there was the lighting. They had a couple canister filters they were using, and those canister filters had a huge magnet with heat. So eliminating all that stuff solved everything. But by increasing, actually the general rule of thumb way back when people were buying mag pumps on a regular basis, that was our pump back in the day, whatever the thread size was on the pump, you doubled it on your plumbing. So if it was 3/4 inch threads, you went to 1.5 inches. And if it was 1 inch threads, you went to 2 inches. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's exactly what it said to do in the instructions that no one ever read. So yeah, it's a true story. And nowadays, a lot of us are thinking, well, I can just use this or I can use that. And the problem is that, let's say you get a nice pump like I was showing you the Vectra. They have a fitting that will fit into that union on the top that then is a hose barb. And a hose barb is this part right here, which I'm going to put it in front of the pipe, so in front of this so you can kind of see it. It's got little ridges on the side, so you can put flexible tubing on there. And this right here has to fit inside the tubing you're going to use, which makes this opening much smaller. So you're actually losing volume because it gets narrower and narrower. So when you have to put in a union, and then you have to put in a bushing, and then you have to put in glue in the fitting, and then you go to the hose barb, by the time you start 1.5 inches, you're all the way down to like 3/4 inch internally for a few inches, and then it has to force its way out through a larger pipe, hopefully. That is the drawback, and that's what we want to avoid. We want to go to a larger size. So I'm highly recommending that to you. And when I was getting ready to plumb this, my friend in Arizona told me, hey Mark, don't forget to increase your pipe size. And I was thinking, but I already have this pipe. I don't want to go to Home Depot. And he is like, you know, and I was like, yeah, you're right. So I drove to Home Depot and got another pipe. And that's why you saw the larger pipe. And it actually looks great, and it's working really well. Now, once I got all that part done, then I had to let it cure. And after I glued everything together, I just basically opened all the valves. I removed the pump from the equation so that basically air could get through every bit of it. I had the lid off the container. I had the gate valve open, and even the little ball valve over here at the bottom for the water change, that was open as well. And I left everything open overnight. Then the next morning, as soon as I woke up and got cleaned up, I came in here and I closed the valves and I hooked up the pump and I turned on the RODI system, and I'd already started collecting water in blue barrels in my kitchen area just so that I could kind of speed up the process because I knew it would take days to fill this thing up. And so I was able to pump another, I don't know, probably about 50 or 80 gallons of water into here as soon as I knew that it wasn't going to leak. And trust me, after every gallon went in, it rose an inch at a time, and I'm watching it, I kept looking at the floor. Is it dripping? Is there any leaks? Is there anything I have to worry about? And I had the gate valve closed, but I had all the plumbing going to the container, and that banjo bulkhead, that's where it all starts. If there was a problem in the beginning, I had to break it all down completely and fix whatever's wrong. And I didn't want to have to do that twice. So I was very happy there was no leaks. And then after the container was about halfway full, I decided to open the gate valve and let the water rush into the pump and into the unions and up the pipe and see what happens. And still no drips, which is just what I wanted. Very happy about that. And then I just had to wait and wait and wait for it to fill up. Yesterday, during the afternoon, I had to determine how much salt I needed for this container because I couldn't remember because I hadn't made salt water in so long. And so what I ended up doing was I Googled. I found a saltwater calculator that would give different recommendations. And the basic information I found was that you need about 1.6 pounds of salt per 5 gallons of water. And I was like, okay, I don't really want to waste salt. So then, I was talking with the moderators from Club Mueller's Reef, and one of the guys on there said, why don't you just put in 125 cups? And I thought, I don't want to count 125 cups, but it made sense. It's a half a cup per gallon typically, and at least that's a good starting point. So I ended up using this adorable little bucket. And this little guy here, it's a 1 gallon bucket. It comes from Aquavitro. It's actually Salinity, which is the brand of salt that I use. And this salt, I bought it in 2016. And I still have that barrel not empty yet because I don't do a lot of water changes. It's my own fault. I bought this monster barrel. It's like as big as a 55-gallon barrel. It holds over 1,000 gallons worth of salt. And so I took my little tiny bucket, and I went ahead and I took the scoop, the 1 cup scoop, and I scooped into here, and I discovered that I could make, basically with a slight hill on the top, this would hold 12 cups. So I needed 10 trips. Or 10 of these little buckets to start with. That sounds right. And so I had 2 of these. I filled up both of these with salt, and then I walked back and forth 5 times. And I filmed it. It's going in the video. So interesting. And I poured it all in, and then I let it mix for an hour or so, and then I checked salinity, and it wasn't high enough. It was like 1.023. So I went back to the saltwater chemistry calculator, and it suggested I needed another 4 pounds of salt. And no, that's not true. It took some guesswork, but now I know. Basically what it takes is it takes 11 of these buckets and then half a bucket. So 11 and a half buckets of this to get me 35 ppt or 1.026, which is exactly what the salinity is. My reef is actually a little bit lower than 1.026 right now, so the water changes will bring it up. And what I used to measure my salinity, I used a couple things. I used a regular refractometer, and I also used the Hanna salinity checker. And this is what it looks like. This costs about $69, and you calibrate it with their own solution. I have 1 package of solution left, and you use this. It says it's only for this device. It is not, it says right on the front, not for refractometers. Or out there, not for use with refractometers. So I have 1 left, and I have to buy more. But, it's a simple test. You put it in the water, you wait 8 seconds, and it tells you your numbers. And then I can go to the tank, and I can put it in there, and I can check. It even shows me the temperature of the water as well. So it's kind of convenient. It's not dead on accurate like I'd like it to be. In other words, you have to keep calibrating it on a regular basis. I would think calibrating it a week ago would be good enough, but it just depends how much you're going to use it. If you are really using it daily, a calibration probably would last you a week. But it's not like you can just calibrate it, and a month from now your numbers are going to be 100% trustworthy. There seems to be some guesswork. There's a lot of mixed opinions on this one. I used it because I bought it, and I also used a handheld refractometer to look through that to double check. And between the 2 devices, I am at 35 ppt, so I'm very happy about that. Now, I wanted to discuss how I'm getting the water out of the container next. So I'm needing 1 more thing from Amazon, and it comes today, and then I can actually do a water change. But I have the wrong piece I can show you. It's not really wrong, it's just too short. So coming out of that that 1 inch pipe, I'm going to put a PVC fitting that is slip on one side, thread on the other, and I'm going to thread this thing in, and then I want to push tubing onto here. So I bought this tubing from Amazon, and this is a braided tubing. It's 1 inch in diameter. And that was really important. I wanted it to be plenty of flow so I can just do the job and get it over with. And I was wanting something that was, not going to kink. This stuff won't kink. It's actually pretty rigid. And because of its rigidity, it actually will not reach the frag tank, which I need this to go to the reef. I need it to go to the frag tank that's behind you. So this is a 10-foot piece. You'd think 10 feet would be plenty, but it was not. So I went to the next size up, which is 25 feet, so I have more than enough. And I am going to then heat this up in some hot water so that it gets nice and pliable at the end. And then I'll be able to push the fitting in. And of course, I'll clamp it so it can't come loose. But this tubing here is going back to Amazon because it's just too short. It's unused. I didn't do anything to it except to discover that it wasn't bendy enough to make my full stretch to the frag system. And it needs to be able to do both. Okay, let's talk about the pump itself for a minute, because that's also what I think is somewhat interesting. The ideas came to me as I was using it, really. And I mentioned this on Instagram and Facebook too, but if you're just a YouTuber, you haven't heard this or seen it. But first what we'll do is we'll switch to this other camera. And I can go ahead and do this. So this right here is the vector driver. And you'll notice that there's one light on there. It's on the lowest setting. I can turn it all the way up to 100% and really move the water through the barrel rapidly for mixing the salt. And then once the water has been mixed, it's had a few hours or so, and now it's just salt water, then I can just turn it all the way down to a slow rate. So it just moves the water gradually and keeps it in solution. That way I don't have to worry about the water going stagnant and becoming a risk. I like that this is controllable. I even put it up here high where I could reach it easily. Having it in this lowest setting is ideal for my situation. And I'm kind of excited that I have the ability to dial it down and dial it up. Now this right here has a quick disconnect cable right here that goes to the pump itself, which is down there. Oh, sorry. Down there. And you can see it's a very small pump. What is that? 6 inches long or so? And then this part goes to a power brick. So what I did back here was I made a little shelf for the power brick so it's not just sitting on the floor. And now it can just sit there and do its little thing and provide the juice, and it's not going to move, it's not going to fall, it's not going to get, if it gets wet, I might be in trouble, but you could say the same thing about these outlets because they're right here. But if like somehow I got water over the top and it was just hitting that, yeah, there's a problem. But I'm not anticipating that. I've never had a problem there in 10 years. I don't know how I'd suddenly do one now because the water comes out the bottom of this container and I don't even fill it from the top. So I don't know. I think it'd be all right. Okay, last thing I have in mind is when I'm pumping the water into my barrel, the water gushes into wherever it's pouring, whether it gushes into your reef, it gushes into the sump, it could kick up a lot of detritus, it can just kick stuff up. I have this, this thing, this, I guess it's clear PVC, a fitting with a bunch of little grooves in it, and I'm thinking I can put this on the end of the hose. I'll just have to try it out and see what it does. But I like it because the end is solid, so water's going to come out the sides, and it won't blast wherever I put it. So if I want to like hang this on the tank and hook up the hose to it, then it could just push water out the sides and just fill without disturbing the environment or kicking up a mess in the sump, for example. So I'm planning to use this, maybe. That's kind of on my hit list of things to do. And then the biggest question, I guess, is going to be how much of a water change am I going to do when it's finally time to do it? Well, I was hoping to release a video last night about the fish vet that came this week. That's our next topic. But unfortunately, I didn't get the report until today, and I wanted the report to be part of the video. So I'll be working on that this evening to get a video out for you guys about her visit. And that way, I can give you all the information of how it all went. But like I said, we're going to talk about it a little bit now, so that way when you watch the video, you'll know some of the backstory. And that way, you'll know more than someone that just watches the fish vet video, which I think is kind of cool. So one of the things she was recommending was a massive water change on the tank because number one, she knew, because she'd already watched my 6-year anniversary video, that I hadn't done a water change in a very long time. And she said, okay, I want you to do a huge water change. She actually recommended 50%. So 50% is pretty much this entire container behind me. This is 250 gallons of water. And I don't know that I want to do one quite that large, but if I do, I'm going to do it early in the morning. And the reason I would do that is this. If my tank gets warmer as we get throughout the day. So in the morning, the tank is going to be around 77 degrees or so. And then as we go through the light period, the metal halides are baking the tank. It then comes down, it goes up to like 79.5, almost 80 degrees. And this barrel is not going to be 80 degrees worth of water. It's going to be colder. So if this is around 76, 77, and that tank is 77, I can do a water change pretty easily and just do this massive water change. If I do need to heat this container, which I've never done, what I could do is borrow the heaters out of the sump and go into the apex and turn them to on and drop them in this container for a few hours. I don't know how many hours it would take to heat up 250 gallons of water a few degrees. Maybe there's another calculator. But that would let me warm this up a little bit more so that they match more equally, and then I can do my big water change. And then, of course, put the heaters back in the sump where they belong. And the water change would be pumped out of the tank or out of the sump and go right through some tubing out the front door of the house and down the driveway. And then the new water would just pump in with a new hose straight in, probably into the sump and pump up. I think that'll be my approach. But the idea is that in the future, it won't be a giant water change. It'll be a smaller one, like, I don't know, 55, 65 gallons or so. I can drain the skimmer section and the return zone and then refill that with fresh water and turn the return pump on and let it all mix up. So that is going to happen in the coming weeks. And I think I'll be making a lot of these to kind of get things on track where it comes to the nitrate battle that you guys have known about for so long. That's going to really cut it down. So, and we'll see what the reef does with it. Maybe it'll like new saltwater. Who knows? I mean, I've heard rumors. Or it could shock my system. I might have twice as many anemones, and I have SPS corals artinning left and right. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen when you start making big changes. But, I like the idea of gradual changes, but I also like the idea of everything being healthy, and bringing in some nice clean water is always a good thing. So now let me talk about storing salt water long term, because that's part of this situation right here. When you've got a barrel of salt water, 55 gallons, 30 gallons, 20 gallons, whatever size you have, and you're not using it for a while, can it go bad? And there's been a lot of debate about this recently, and I've always thought that was kind of weird, because as long as the salt water is circulating, it's perfectly good salt water. The reef tank we have is salt water with circulation. And what do we add to it? Alkaline and calcium. Why do we add that? Because the corals are absorbing it. There's no corals in here. There's no fish in here. There's nothing polluting it. It's just salt water in suspension that's moving. The only difference is the container is closed. It's not open to the environment because you don't want pollutants to get into it, bugs, anything like that could make your water impure. So we have nice, pure, 0 TDS RODI water. We add all that salt. You can't measure it with a TDS meter at this point because now it's salt water, but it's pure. And everything you use is clean. Your bucket is clean. Your hands are clean. The salt you put in, hopefully, is clean. And, one quick little warning. When you guys are using salt and you're adding it to water, it's really important not to let any of the dust that kicks up while you're doing this get into your eyes or inhale it into your nose. I was trying to be very careful, but I did 11 trips of getting salt, and I kept scooping and pouring, and you could see the white little cloud. My glasses even got a little cloudy, and the inside of my nostrils were burning just a little bit. And that was with me being super cautious not to inhale. And my process used to be, I had a different brand of salt that came in bags, and I would carry the bag up to the top, and I would slit it and just pour it in the barrel. That was super convenient, and I just needed 6 bags and I was done. I loved how easy that was. That brand of salt is no longer available, so I'm using a big barrel, and I have to reach way down in the barrel, scoop it out, pour it into the bucket, and it would even tilt the bucket to pour it in to reduce the falling, to reduce the puff of white smoky stuff that came up, And yet even then, like I said, after all those trips and my head down in that barrel so many times, I ended up, my nose was burning a little bit briefly, but I tried to hold my breath when I stuck my head down there, and then I came up, I'd kind of move back and pour it. So just try to keep that in mind, because you don't want to get any kind of adverse reaction while you're working on your aquarium. And then finally, what could go wrong with your saltwater over time? Sitting in a barrel running for weeks or months on end. Well, what you can do a month from now is you can test the water. So you've got this water, it's had constant circulation. Room temperature is probably going to be totally fine. If it's in a basement or it's in a garage and it's covered, you probably do need to put in a heater to keep the temperature up. I guess it just depends. If you're using a huge mag pump, you probably don't even need a heater because those pumps run really hot anyway. But you've got the water circulating, you can test it. And odds are the only thing you're going to discover is the alkalinity has dropped. And that seems to happen with a lot of brands of salt. It's not specific to any certain brand. And all you have to do is buffer it up. And you can use soda ash for that. You just figure out what your alkalinity level is now, how much the water volume is, what's the alkalinity level you want. Use the Reef chemistry calculator. It'll say you need 12 teaspoons of soda ash. You mix that in a cup of water and you pour it into your barrel and you check alkalinity in 20 minutes. And if it's right where it needs to be and your temperature's right and your salinity is right, you can do a water change. It's still good to go. So don't fear salt that's been sitting in a container for a while, because it actually is not bad. It doesn't go bad unless it's stagnant. If the pump is off indefinitely, weeks, no, don't use it. Absolutely do not use it. But salt water that's always moving is very safe to use. And when I had this thing running before, like I said, I've had this for 10 years. So it's been down for about a year, I guess, probably, maybe slightly longer. But for 9 years, I would just use it. And this might last me 3 months the way I was using it. And a water change I did 3 months later, my reef still didn't skip a beat. I didn't see a decline. I didn't see corals losing color, nothing weird. I just double checked alkalinity. If it wasn't right, I buffered it up, double checked it again, and then I proceeded with a water change, and all was well. So those of you that think you have to use the salt within a couple hours of mixing, and that if it's been a day or two and you can't use it now, that's not true. It really is not true. And I remember before I had this and I was just mixing in a saltwater barrel, I would let mine mix for 2 or 3 days. I mean, it was done in 20 minutes or an hour, but then I just let it circulate for 2 or 3 days before I finally got around to the water change. And that was just normal operating procedure for me. So I think that's everything I want to talk about on this topic specifically. Okay. I forgot to mention this, darn it. I don't know if Andrea did already or not. If we didn't do it, then starting this minute right now for the next hour, 5 people will be selected from this episode, from this live stream, that will get a free issue of Coral Magazine. And I wish I had one in my hand to hold up right now. I already shipped out quite a few last week, and we're doing another 5 this weekend. So if you would like the Coral Magazine, I will ship it to you. It has to be in the United States. Shipping is not free. It costs money, and I'm trying to keep my costs down, so I'm just doing it to people in the United States. And I apologize. If you are wanting Coral Magazine, you can go to Coral Magazine's official website. You can place an order for a subscription, which could be digital only, so you don't have to wait for anything to come in the mail, and you can just download it when they become available and read them on your tablet or your computer, maybe on your phone. And then if you want the hard copy where you can flip through the magazine while you're sitting on the toilet, that is available too. 2 different prices, and there are 6 issues per year. And I believe the subscription is like I think it's like $36 a year. So it's not super, it's cheaper than a frag. Cheaper than most frags. Alrighty. Now, any questions you're going to ask? I'm going to try to work my way through the chat now. And we're going to answer some questions. I'm going to get out of here. I got so much to do today. I cannot do a long stream. And so no placing bets. It's not going to happen. We're just going to wrap this up and move on with our lives today. And next weekend, there will be another live stream at 2 p.m. But if you're asking any questions, please use like the same sign using an email address, Mila's Reef, so I can just see it. It's just so much easier for me to find your questions that way, especially when you guys are talking to each other in the chat and I'm trying to figure out who we're speaking to. So if you have questions now's the time to ask, whether it's about this or I did say I was going to talk about the vet. So let me go into that while you're thinking about your questions. So the vet came on Wednesday, and she got here around 12:30 in the afternoon, and she was here for about 4 hours. It was a nice house call. She showed up in her vehicle, and she had a whole bunch of stuff to bring in, so I helped her carry it inside. And I had a fish trap already in the tank, one I built a long time ago, probably 14, 15 years ago. I remember using that trap in the 280-gallon tank. So that was a long time ago. And I put it in the tank, and it was just hanging in there. Matter of fact, I rigged it because it wasn't what I wanted to use. I was going to build a new one and just never had the time. So I used the old trap that was sitting on the shelf. I cleaned it up really good, got all the dust off it, made sure it was clean and safe to put in the tank. Suspended in the tank, removed the door, and made sure it was clipped at the top where it could not fall in or move or budge or anything. And in the process of just getting it set up, I broke off a huge piece of the acropora of the shadow caster, which you might have saw on Instagram. It was a big old branch, just so I jammed it into the colony, and you can't even tell, it's still there. But that was kind of a slight bummer, but whatever. And then I'm looking at the tank, and Spock swims under the trap and parks. And the trap's clear acrylic. And I'm looking at her, and I'm looking at the trap. They're about the same length. I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good because the trap isn't big enough. And I just didn't give that a lot of thought. So, I mean, you know, I was planning to build a new trap that would be bigger than the one I owned already, but the one I owned was pretty big. And you're going to see it in the video that I'll be releasing next. But she hung out under that. The vet showed up, and she wanted to study everything. She wanted to see the entire system. She wanted to see all the filtration. She wanted to see what I'm putting in the tank, you know, which I mentioned Prodivio. I mentioned magnesium, AcroPower, the calcium reactor itself, RODI water. She wanted to see the water filtration unit. She wanted to see the foods I use every night and the flake food I use during the daytime, the nori that I use. I mean, she wanted to see all of that. Anything that goes in the tank, she wanted to see it. She wanted to see the test kits that I use. And we went through all that stuff. And then using my work table that's in the living room, she went ahead and set up an entire lab on top of it. We put a big piece of plastic on top. That was hers. And then she had her scale. She had her examination table with these lights that came up. She had a microscope handy. She had a UV light handy, a bunch of tools, a bunch of different test kits. And she went ahead and she measured for everything. I mean, she looked for ammonia. She looked for chlorine, chloramine. And then she went through all the basic tests that we already do. And I'm going to tell you up front, and I'm going to mention it in that video as well, the only thing that I was a little bit unhappy with was that her choice of test kits for all of her testing was API. And I actually asked her about that. I said, why are you using API test kits? Because in this hobby, a lot of us put those down. And she said, I try to use the test kits that are readily available for anyone to buy anywhere. And so they can get these anywhere. And I was like, all right, fair enough. But I wasn't really a fan of that. You know, I would have rather seen her using Saltwater test kits or something like that. But that's if we're going to nitpick something, it's going to be that. But other than that, she still had to do the tests. And matter of fact, her API test kit showed higher nitrate than mine did. So the biggest offender that she found in all my water, I mean, everything she checked, she said nitrate is your evil doing. And she said, got to work on that. And that was the biggest thing. So then, after she was almost done with what she had to do with all of her tests, and I'll show you, there was a really cool kit that she had for measuring chlorine and chloramine. And I was like, can I take a picture of that? So that will be included in the video because that was different. And I've been wanting for the longest time for you guys to have a chloramine test kit. The problem with those kits is usually it's going to cost you 70 to 100 bucks. There's probably going to be 100 tests in there, and you need to do like 3 or 4 tests a year, which means all the reagent that you got is kind of useless after a year because it expires. And so I've always wished there was a small chloramine test kit for hobbyists that has 5 tests in it. And maybe it costs you 15 bucks, you know? And you could check your tap water, then you could check after your RODI, and if you do have chloramine and it shows up in that test, then you can go ahead and install something like a chloramine buster filter, and you can test again and say, okay, they're gone. And then you're not going to check it again for another year because you're happy, it's working. And then, you know, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months from now, you're like, let me check again and make sure that filter's still doing its job. And so, I mean, that's why you'll hardly use it, but you need it at least a couple of times. So to buy a giant kit makes no sense. And that's unfortunate. The only other thing I could think of doing, and it's not going to be a quick, easy process, would be one person buys it, they do their tests, you know, for that week or whatever, and then they ship it to the next person and the next person until the kit's used up. And there's all that shipping. And there's the risk of it getting lost or the next person not shipping to the next person, that kind of thing. So I really wish there was a small one. If BRS is watching this video, they should make a small little kit that is affordable and has a few tests in there rather than buying the bulk pack. I even talked to Lamont, which is a major scientific testing company, and asked them, can we buy all the reagent in bulk, and then I can make small test cards? And I mean, I was thinking really low tech, Ziploc bags, put the stuff in there and just mail it to you. And he's like, yeah, actually, you could do that if you wanted to. And I was just thinking, okay, but it sounded like more work, And there's only so many hours in the day. I have lots of ideas. I don't always have time for the ideas I have. But after she was almost done, I said, okay, I need to catch Spock for you. I might as well do it now, so that way when you're done, you'll have a fish ready to work on, and you're not sitting there watching me try to catch a fish. So the bait that I used was a piece of nori that was on one of those Two Little Fishies magnetic clips. And I put the clip inside the trap as far as I could reach, and I took the other magnetic part that's usually outside the tank, I put it on the other side of the trap and clipped it to the far end of the trap. And I just wanted the fish to swim in and then close the door. And all the fish were trying to eat the solid end of the acrylic box and could not get to the nori, and they didn't understand why. Because it's clear. Maybe they can't see it. Maybe all they see is the clip moving in the nori, but they couldn't. And they kept nipping at it, and it was really hard for them to understand they couldn't get to it. It was really odd. Spock was just as annoyed, and she was kind of like, why can't I get this? It's right here in front of me. And she started to swim off toward the left end of my tank, and then I thought, okay, maybe she'll do a big lap, and she'll come around the right side and swim right in. But instead, she didn't. She started to go up, and then she was like, nope, and she went under the trap, and then she turned, and she swam right in, and I closed the door. The whole process wasn't even a minute and a half. It was unbelievable. It was so easy. I was like, wow. And then she was just in there with the door shut behind her, basically her tail almost hitting the door, and she's just eating the nori, and flakes of nori just going in there like crazy. It looks like confetti. And then the next step was to remove the trap, full of water and Spock, and hand it down to the vet, which, we had to pour her into a bucket, and then she was in a bucket for a while with an air stone, and then we did a second bucket, and we transferred her because that water was so full of flakes, I believe, from the nori. And at this point, she would then be, sedated, and that doesn't put him to sleep, it just makes him drunk. And so she put in whatever elixir she needed in that container of water, which was a gallon. It was 1 3/4 gallons of water in the bucket. And then she added her elixir, stirred it up, moved the air stone over, and we moved Spock into there. And then Spock basically hung out in this liquid for about 5 or 6 minutes. And what we were watching for is for her to lean over. And when she leans over, then she's sedated. She's drunk. And that would allow the vet to remove her and put her on the table and measure her, and then put her back in sedation and let her breathe, and then put her back on the table and then inspect her for any kind of defects, and then put her back in the water to breathe again. And so each time Spock came out, she came out for maybe a minute while she was being handled, and then she was put back into the liquid bath to keep her sedated, but make sure she kept breathing. And you pretty much knew. I mean, I would have been very nervous doing this. Watching the vet handle it, it was very simple. She's handled, I don't know, 1 million fish. It was no big deal to her. But the fish is calm, and the gills are opening and closing right there on the table. And then when it starts to squirm a little bit, she puts it immediately back in the bucket, lets it get some air, and then brings it back out again. And so she did that repeatedly. She flipped Spock over completely. She studied every part of her body. She looked at her gills. She studied her mouth. She studied her fins. She really wanted to make sure everything was good. And everything came out really well. And so then we finally got to the eyes. And that was my big concern. And that was the thing I was hoping maybe something can be done to fix it. And she put on some kind of a drop of something that then with a black light, or the UV light, she could then see if there, what was going on with the eye. Where is the problem? Is it on the surface? Is it inside the eye? And she looked at it all and started to tell me her thoughts, her diagnosis, so to speak. And then back into the water. And then we'd take her out again, and we'd study the other eye just to double check and see if there was anything going on there. And matter of fact, she says the other eye has a little hint of what's happening in the right eye, which is not it doesn't make me happy to hear that, but we'll see. Now, I was hoping she'd have some tool and she sucks all the white out. Because the eye of a fish is like a round lens, you know, it's like a clear gel. When the fish is facing you head on, you can see that clear bubble in their, let's call it the, I don't know what this is, the iris, whatever it is. That part's receded, and I was kind of hoping maybe that white stuff could be removed and then, you know, let the eye heal. And the vet was saying that she didn't want to touch it. She didn't want to take a sample off of it, because if she cut open the lens, it would be an openly exposed eye, and it could allow bacteria to get in there and make things even worse. Yeah, I didn't really want that to happen. I wanted her to just, you know, I wanted a miracle. I didn't know if it was even possible, and so I wanted to see what would happen here. And when she said that, I thought, yeah, that makes sense, because it's not like we have some pristine hospital tank we can put her into where we know, you know, nothing weird is going to happen. That wasn't even a discussion. So then we also looked at that eye under the UV light, and you could see a line across the cornea, and that's where she scratched it. And I think that's where this all started. I think she scratched against a rock at some point in her life, and it's just been getting worse over time. But she didn't want to do that. She also said, look, Spock is 100% healthy. She's in great shape. Her gills are gorgeous. She said, did you look at the gills? They are red. They are as red could be. That is perfect. That's fantastic. And she goes, I call this fish a 5. And I thought that was funny because, you know, we always think a scale of 1 to 10. And she said, this fish is a solid 5. And I was like, okay. And she says, 5 is good. She said, 1 is bad. It's way too thin. 10 is bad, it's way too fat. This fish is exactly where I wanted to be. I was like, okay, that's really cool. So Spock's a 5. Don't ever forget it. And she also said, I can take a sample off of her body and do a test. She says, but if I do that, what I'm doing is I'm scraping off some of the protective mucus layer. And again, it's like a bald spot that a bacterial infection could get in. And she said, I don't want to do that either to a fish that is 100% healthy. The only thing we saw was the eye. The eye didn't have red in it. She wasn't scratching it. She didn't appear to be in pain. She doesn't have any kind of like bacteria building up around the edges. There was nothing going on. It's just like a glaucoma situation. And she did say there is one fish doctor that she knows of in the U.S. that could potentially do surgery to fix an eye. It sounds like dollars and cents to me on that one. So I don't know. I mean, I could always ask her again. You know, she basically felt Spock is doing well. She'd like to see her again in 6 months and see if there's any change. But other than that, the overlying premise from her whole visit was get those nitrates down and things like this will probably dissipate. And because Spock has a problem with her eye, my cold tang has a weird thing on the face, and my little yellow tang that's always getting bullied seems to be stressed. You know, like it's stress-induced attacks. You know, it's not like I don't see HLLE on my tangs, and the other tangs look all 100% healthy. The hippo's healthy, the purple's healthy, the bigger yellow is healthy. You know, all 3 of those are doing great. All the other fish are doing great. But I got 3 fish that are a little off, and I just wish they were perfect. And so I'm thinking if I can catch the smaller yellow tang, which would be really hard because she's so skittish. But if I could remove her, I could put her in the frag tank, and she would be away from the yellow and purple that chase her all the time. She might just turn around and turn into a very happy fish. The coal, maybe it's the nitrates. Maybe it's just causing chaos because there's specific things that can cause those depressions in the face. HLLE is the first thing, which is head and lateral line erosion. But usually you see it across their spine, and she doesn't have anything on her body. It's just on her face, which is why my friends thought it was a nutritional problem and that I need to feed more nori to the tank. Instead, it's maybe it is the nitrates. Maybe I should have brought them down. I mean, you guys know I've tried different products trying to bring them down. I've used the brick, I've used Nopox, I've tried vodka dosing, I've tried different things. I've got the turf scrubber to hook up, which I have to figure out where to put in this room, and I really don't have a sweet spot for it, which is my biggest hurdle. I might shove it in that corner and put it up kind of high and then have it drain over the lip into the sump. That might, you know, right down here, this spot might be my ideal spot. But then I can now finally do water changes, which was really important. It's like this is the first thing that had to happen for everything else to get done because I didn't have access to saltwater. And I've been really lucky I didn't have an emergency happen over the last year where I needed a bunch of salt water. And because of letting things get in the way, I just never got around to it. So I'm really glad this project's, I mean, it's 99% done. I'm waiting for a longer hose. I need to go pick up one PVC fitting from Home Depot and then hook it up. And then I need to figure out a way to support that hose. Some kind of a hose hanger, and I don't know where to put it. Let me put this here, and I'll let you guys give me some advice of what you think I might be able to use for this general spot. Okay, I'm definitely tripping on cords now. All right. So we're going to switch to this one. Move this back a little bit further. So we've got, I mean, this pipe might be cut shorter. It's, you know, coming out about 4 inches or so. I might cut it back a little bit more and have this elbow right about here. And then the idea was that it would flow straight into the hose. But you see, I really kind of need the hose to be here on some kind of a hanger. But do I double stick tape it to the barrel, you know, the hanger, so it just holds on with 3M tape? Do I put it against the wall somehow because I've got all this stuff in the way? You know, I just don't have a really great place or way to support this, and I definitely want to support the hose. And consider, this is only 10 foot of hose. I'm going to have a 25-foot hose, so it's going to be nearly triple what we're looking at in size. And that way I can then reach off of here and just uncoil it and go use it wherever I need to use it. So I'm kind of needing something that can hold this up where the hose is supported and won't kink or bend and, you know, fold down from the weight of water. So if you have a great idea, I would love to hear it. I've been kind of racking my brain trying to figure it out, and nothing really has come to mind yet. You know, usually I try to think of something made of acrylic. So that's the end of it. I mean, for right now, I can just have the hose lying on the floor and just pick it up and go use it, but I kind of like it on a hanger and keep the floor space open so there's less things to trip on in this room. And once I put the turf scrubber in that corner, it's another object in this room. So got to figure that out. I'm going to go look for questions now so I can answer some. Derby City Reefer says, I have a phosphate question. The level is 0.25, and last night I hooked up my BRS dual chamber reactor with GFO and carbon, and today phosphates are 0.05. Is that going to be a problem? Going from 0.25 to 0.05 is not a problem. The problem is that it could continue to go all the way to 0 and just stay there because it's so efficient, because you removed all of it in one, overnight. So the question is, did you use too much GFO? The general rule of thumb when running GFO through any kind of reactor is you put it through very, very slowly. You don't even want the media to be moving. I mean, just the surface can kind of wiggle a little bit like a moonquake. That's what I call it. Just instead of an earthquake, it's a moonquake because it drifts up and down slowly because the gravity is less on the moon. And then you want to measure the output of the reactor, and the water coming out of the reactor should be 0 phosphate. And if it's coming out as high as it's going in, the GFO is no good. If it's coming out at 0, that's great, but is it going to strip your tank completely of all the phosphate to the point where you end up with issues like dinoflagellates, or cyanobacteria, or these things that happen in the once all the phosphate's been removed from the system? Our corals do need a little bit of phosphate. So I almost feel like since you brought it down so quickly in one night, you probably used too much GFO and should have used a lesser amount. It's not the end of the world. I would maybe turn the flow down on the reactor and keep testing. Maybe test every single day this week and just see if you're staying at 0.05. If you are, everything's great. If it keeps going down more and more and more, then you may need to not run it for a while and let it kind of build up again, and then kind of find a way where you can gradually keep it at a low point nonstop day after day after day. Dan says, how do you recommend raising the return pump in a DIY sump? I want to add a siphon overflow to my tank, and I need to limit how much the return pump can add if I lose siphon. Ugh. Okay. Number one, we drain from the tank. Even if you're using a hang-on back overflow tube, that is box to box with a U-tube. And that is the siphon, but just from there to there, that's the siphon. Then you just have a drain coming down. If you are trying to siphon the water out of the tank and into the sump, and then find a return pump that will push up enough water to kind of equalize, that's never going to work. Never, never, never going to work. It'll work for an hour. Then 2 hours from now, you have a mess. Or you'll hear it sucking air. Something's going to go wrong. We actually set the return pump on the bottom of the sump. And we have the right water level above the pump so that it's just sucking in water and no air. And you want to have enough empty space in the sump that if there was a power outage and some water drains down and comes down through the plumbing and a little bit, the last of it siphons out from the overflow boxes, then the sump still holds all the water. And to test this, the best way to do it is to unplug your return pump, unplug your skimmer, and stand back and watch and see what happens. And if the sump starts to fill to the point of overflowing, plug it back in and make some changes, like lift your lock line up a little higher in the tank so it can't siphon out that much water. That's your first step. We want to make sure that the sump will hold all the water in a power outage. But we don't try to put the return pump up higher or in a different height in the sump. We want to have the right amount of water in the sump in the first place. So perhaps the water level in your return zone is too high. Bring it down lower so that you have the right amount there with enough empty volume to hold extra water that drains. Other than that, that's kind of your homework. On my website, there's an article called What is a Sump? And I talk about all this stuff when it comes to sumps. So if you'll Google that, you'll find that article be super helpful in helping you get this all sorted out. Lefty says that he just got his, I assume it's a he, just got his Coral magazine and was very interested and found great articles in there. Thanks for letting us know. I'm glad you're enjoying it. The spiritual counselor says, I recently dipped a 14-head hammer in Revive because it wasn't opening, and I saw tons of brown flatworms fall off, yet never saw them in the tank. What's the best way to get rid of them? No other euphilia are affected. Well, you've pretty much done it. You can take that coral out again and dip it again, like after a couple of days, but try not to stress it out too much. The more you manhandle it, the worse it's going to be for the coral. But if you want to dip it a couple more times to make sure you've eliminated them all, that would be the easiest course of action. If you want to treat the tank for flatworms, you can, but since you don't see them anywhere else, I would focus on the coral itself, and I would deal with it individually and put it back in the tank. And hopefully that'll take care of itself. Callie says, I've been manually dosing for 8 months using 15 milliliters per day, split between the AM and the PM. My alkalinity stays around 8.5 DKH. Now that I'm using a doser, 15 milliliters over the course of the entire day, DKH went up to 9.1 in the first day. Well, I'm glad you're testing and verifying what's happening. It's only a slight jump. It's not a lot. We're only talking about 0.6 DKH, so I wouldn't be too concerned. But you may need to dose a little bit less, maybe 14 milliliters a day, and keep checking. Like if it doses in the morning, check in the evening with a test kit. Usually after you've put anything in the tank, a matter of, I'd say within a couple of hours, maybe even sooner, but I would wait a couple hours and then measure. And then, but I wouldn't keep making changes every single day because you've got to see what is trending. Like if you didn't do anything today and just left it the way it's going and wrote that down, what just happened, on a little notepad, and then tomorrow you test again, is it 9.3? And then you test it again the next day, is it 9.5? Then it literally is rising every day and you need to dose less. But if you see that it was 9.1 today, but tomorrow it's 8.9, and then the day after that it's 9.0, and then the day after that it's 8.7, maybe you've got the right dose anyway. So I would keep testing and watching. Fellow Reefer has a question for me. Thank you for the super chat. So let me find your question. Here it is. I have set up my mixing station and will use brute containers, they're 44 gallons each, with a high and low optical sensor and both connected to the apex with a solenoid to fill it up with a T push-in connectors. And I'm going to use Nero 5 pumps for circulation. That's pretty good. Yeah, actually I like it. The Nero 5 pumps are super nice because you can adjust the speed up and down. As long as you don't have any salt sitting in the bottom of the barrel, if it's literally mixing it up, that'd be great. When you think about the system behind me, this giant tank, there is nothing down low to move the water other than it's falling down and being sucked out the side. And yet all my salt melts. I don't look down at the bottom and see a whole bunch of stuff. Matter of fact, I don't really, it stays really clean in this thing. I've never, like I said, I've been using this thing for so many years. I've filled it up many times. I've drained it and cleaned it probably 7 times in 10 years. And usually it's just a little bit of brown on the inside of these walls that just kind of bothers me, and nothing like you see at the fish store. You go to the fish store and this thing is like chocolate brown or worse, or it's kind of green. You're like, oh, and it's like, aren't you going to clean your container? So, I'd like to clean mine. Frank's Tanks, the fish store by me, he takes his containers out of the store, goes to the car wash and hits them with a pressure washer and brings them back. I'd love to be able to do that, but like I said earlier, I can't get this out of the room. If I ever have to get a new one, I'll probably get one a little bit smaller that I can get in and out of this door, just so it'd be a little bit easier, because I could clean in the driveway, it'd be so much quicker. But for now, I'm still trapped with this giant thing. Oh, I don't think I ever told you guys what I paid for it. I told you that they cost a lot and shipping was double. Well, the one I got off of Craigslist, when I got there, like I said, you had several of them. And and he asked me how many do I want, and I said just the one. And he said, well, do you want this one that's got plumbing? Or do you want this one? Or do you want this one that's brand new? I was like, I want the brand new one. And he said, okay, I'm going to charge you $125. And I was like, done. I was really happy. I'm getting this giant container for just over $100. And it's a vodka distillery that's here in Texas. And I was telling him I'm using it for my saltwater tank. He said to me, I used to have a saltwater aquarium, and so, what's changed and how are things going? And I was telling him, well, actually, I dosed vodka to my tank to keep nitrates under control. I was doing that back, with my 280-gallon tank. And he said, well, here. And he gave me a bottle of vodka, too. So I got the container for $125 plus a free bottle of vodka. And that was great. And the thing was so big, I had to strap it to the top of my trailer. I had this roof rack where you'd put plywood. And I had this container sitting on the top with those orange straps holding it on. And I drove it all the way home, and I had nowhere to put it initially, and I had to put it on the side of the house. So it was sitting in the yard for a while before this room ever got built. But yeah, I got a heck of a deal on this container. And 10 years later, it still looks great. Now that I've replaced the bulkhead in the bottom, I probably will get another 10 years out of it. Now, fellow Reefer, you asked about, is it a good setup? Yes, everything sounds great. I'm sure you've got a good plan for how you're going to pump water from one barrel to the next, or how you can get water out of the barrel. And then you also want to remember you have to clean them, just like I have to clean mine. So about once a year, you're going to want to take your container and you're going to scrub it down clean with a citric acid or bleach water, which is 10 parts water to 1 part bleach, and just scrub the walls of the container with a sponge or an old t-shirt. Just scrub everything down with the bleach water. Rinse it really, really well. Really well. Then I like to do this when the weather's nice outside. And then put the container, upside down, but where it can still kind of breathe in the sun for 24 hours. And that way it's got sunlight on it, it bakes off any kind of potential bleach that could possibly exist, and your container will be nice and clean and pure. And then when you put in your RO water and you measure the barrel for TDS, it should be 0 and not like 44 or some number like that, because as the barrel is sitting, they actually can just start leaching stuff out of them. They just do. And so by cleaning them, you solve the problem. So don't forget to do that. Ziggy says, you escaped the red door room. I did. We did it in under, we had an hour to get out, and we got done in 50 minutes. I did this for my birthday a couple years ago with my son. It was a lot of fun. But you haven't escaped Brooklyn. Well, I don't know what to tell you about Brooklyn. I mean, it's an okay place. I was born in Manhattan, so so I must look down upon you. Did I beat you? I don't know how to say this name. Shoujuan says, what do you look for when deciding when the tank needs a water change? Well, if the tank is in crisis, it needs a water change. If the tank's doing really well, I really don't want to do a water change. But if you just want to follow a nice pattern or a routine, changing 25% of your water once a month is a perfectly acceptable and well-known method of taking care of a saltwater tank. Freshwater people change water in their tanks every week. I've heard that from every freshwater person I know. And with saltwater, we just do it once a month. Now, more and more people these days are saying, oh, I set up automatic water changes. It does it every single day. It's pulling out 3 gallons a day. I change 150 a month, 90 gallons a month. And I'm like, okay. But, you know, that's because they completely automated it. And but if you're going to manually do it, just pick when you want to do it, like the first of every month, and just do your water change. As long as your pH, your temperature, and your salinity match, you can change as much or little water as you want. Mad Hatter's Reef, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. What are you doing on my channel? I follow him on Instagram. Jamie says, it's been a long while without a large water change. Do you worry it may shock your tank, even with everything you test to make sure it matches your tank's water? I'm not too worried. I mean, you know, if everything's matching barrel to barrel, barrel to tank, then technically it's just sort of like an infusion of better water than what's in there. You're removing the bad and you're putting in good, but all the other stuff stays the same. Your calcium's the same, your magnesium's the same, your alkaline's the same, your salinity's the same, your temperature's the same. That's all the same. So in theory, it should be fine. But I mean, yeah, there's some little level deep down. I mean, I was like, But at the same time, doing a 50% water change would cut my nitrate in half in one session. But like I said, I have to use every drop of this to do it. It's a 450-gallon system. That means I have to change 225. And this has 250 gallons of water in it. It's crazy. And I'd have to take out a lot of water out of this tank. Now, that would mean that all of my corals would be exposed. Probably, I bet the tank, because we know these tanks don't hold what they say. It's a 400-gallon tank, but if you take inside measurements and you also account for rock and sand displacement, I might have 310 gallons of water inside that tank. And so if I take out 225 gallons of water, I might be this far from the sand. All the fish will be swimming along the bottom thinking, what the hell just happened? Because he never does that. Matter of fact, when we handled Spock, when we had to remove her from the trap, and then she had to go through all that stuff with the vet, that's the first time she's been touched since 2014 when she was put into this tank. And I don't pet my fish. I'm digressing for a second here. I want to mention it. You know, remember I told you the doctor didn't really want to take a sample off of the surface of her body? And she says, you know why I'd rather not do that? And I said, actually, I do. And I said, and I don't pet my fish. And she says, that's good. Because a lot of people want to pet their fish. They think it's cool, they think it's cute, but you're actually rubbing off that mucous membrane that protects them. And that's, it's really important for them to kind of have their shield all over their body to avoid an infection. And so while I understand the urge, the desire, the want to do that, I don't recommend it. And with Spock, I mean, I've had her forever, and yet I still don't handle her. When we did everything, the doctor was wearing disposable gloves. Matter of fact, one of the things she recommended to me, but I don't see me doing it, is getting those big, long, thin plastic sleeve gloves to work in the tank. And she said, you know, I wouldn't be a good vet if I didn't warn you that there is some bacteria in saltwater tanks that can just get into a minor cut, and you could have this bacterial reaction. You know, and it kind of reminds me of that flesh-eating disease. And she's like, you know, you should be aware. I'm like, you should have told me this 23 years ago. So it's not that I'm being stubborn. I don't see myself doing it. I do put on gloves when I'm working with Paleothoa or with zoanthids. I wear gloves when I'm working with the putty that you have to mix up in your hands and knead until it's all uniform in color and then put it in the tank. I use that. And then the other thing she mentioned is any gloves you use shouldn't have a powder on the inside because the powder would come out and into your tank. So just a few helpful things that she mentioned. I'll try to remember to put those in the video as well. How are we doing on time? All right. Kevin says, do you know of any tricks to avoid sucking up sand when vacuuming the sand bed? I'm dealing with a cyano or a dino issue. Well, okay, either one of those you've got is a whole, it's way beyond just siphoning. Siphoning just makes you feel good, but it doesn't get rid of the problem at all. It just keeps coming back day after day after day. You're just reducing its volume. If you have a long gravel vac and you hold it at an angle, you push down into the sand and you'll see the water turn brown and you'll see some sand rising. You can lift the gravel vac up and have it at an angle, and then the sand will start to trickle out or rain out of the tube, and you kind of just keep doing this motion. You're not just like vacuuming back and forth. You're pressing down and lift and press down and lift and press down. And if all the sand comes to the very top and it's about to go out the tube, you can pinch the hose and kind of shake it to get the sand to come out, and then go back to continuing siphoning. But if you have a short one, it's not gonna do the job. You need a nice long one. The one I have for my tank, which I only use once in a blue moon, it's probably 30 inches long, and it gives me so much area to siphon sand, and it just kind of tumbles down in the lower third, and all the rest is just dirty water. And I'm planning to use one on my anemone cube because that tank is 6 years old. The sand bed is about this tall. It's got 14 fish in there, pooping in there every single day. And so having saltwater, I can go ahead and really siphon that sand bed clean. And I have stupid Aptasia living in the sand bed of that tank because there's nothing that's a predator to them because it's the anemone cube. And when I siphon the sand bed, the Aptasia just go right out because they're so light. So that's actually really awesome. Yeah, Michael, that's what I have to do. I have to figure out, or someone else can do the math for me. That's fine too. I would just need to tell you, maybe I'll find you on Facebook and let you do the homework for me. But I'll tell you the water volume, and I'll tell you the temperature it is, and the temperature I want it to be. And then you can say, okay, it's going to be this. Or maybe I can figure it out. But yes, you're right. Fellow Reefer, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And I don't know if Andrea picked you or not. But yeah. Yeah, I did see those pictures. Mina, he posted pictures of his rock and wanted to know if he was starting to see coralline on the rock yet. It's kind of early on the tank, and had all the measurements except magnesium. And magnesium is super important for coralline growth. So you need to get that test kit next. You need to measure. And if you're somewhere between 13 and 1400 ppm, odds are whatever you're looking at will definitely turn into coralline. So hang in there. You just need to buy one more test kit. And Mina, thank you for the super chat. Marco is writing from Australia and says he's been watching for a very long time and is happy to catch one of the live streams and enjoys the interesting information and learns a lot. So keep up the great work. I will try to do my best for you guys. Altaho asks me, why don't you plumb the water change output into your manifold near the sump instead of hanging it over the top and splashing your display? Well, I haven't decided what I'm going to do. I kind of like the idea of some kind of a hook system that I can hook on the side of the sump or hook it on the tank and just pump the water in. I like that idea. I haven't committed to anything yet. I can't put it into the manifold because the manifold is a pump pushing water out. And also, I need the ability to move the output to the other tank because that tank, as I've mentioned many times, has been so neglected. And the biggest neglect was the lack of water changes because I had no way to easily do it. I wanted to be able to pump the water into that tank without having to carry buckets. And so stubbornly, I've been holding out for that moment. And now I have an ability to walk a hose across the room and refill the sump. And I'll be pumping water out and down the driveway with a large pump and some ridiculously long tubing. So that all works out. I used to try to use the floor drain I have in this room, but the floor drain, either it's got so much detritus built up in it and I have to go in there and clean it all out, or it's just not a large enough diameter to handle a nice water change. So, I mean, I can trickle it out with some very small hose. This right here is probably 3/8 tubing. It's disgusting. And I've used this, oh, it says 1/2 inch ID. So this is 1/2 inch tubing, and I've put this in the sump before, and I put this over the floor drain, and I would just let it weep out, for the next 10 minutes or so. And when that zone was empty, I moved the hose over the next zone and let that drain out. And the floor drain seemed to keep up without overfilling, because the floor drain is hooked up to some PVC pipe that hugs the walls of the garage and then pops out the front of my house and goes down the driveway. And I've been doing that water change in the past late at night when the world was asleep, just because I don't want to hear anything about what are you doing. I just keep my stuff private. But I might just pump it out the driveway during the daytime, like I said. So we'll see. I haven't made any decisions yet. I'm working on ideas. Okay, Neil says, why do you test for chloramine? Where does it come from? And what effect does it have? Chloramine is something that the city puts into the water to make it safe for human consumption. And it's a combination of chlorine and ammonia that's locked together. And chloramine, because it's a locked atom, or I don't know, element is probably a better description, it goes right through the RODI system, comes out the other end still intact. But if you can rip those two apart and then you have chlorine and ammonia, the RODI system can remove it. But while they're combined, it can't remove it. It just flows through everything and comes out the other. It comes out the DI, and you still have it. So we don't want to have any chloramine. And a lot of people for the last decade have been so worried about chloramine, maybe longer, maybe 15 years, have been so worried about chloramines, and yet all they would do is they'd say, well, I saw my city report and it says we have chloramine. So I went to BRS and I bought the Chloramine Buster, or I went to AquaFX and got the Chloramine Buster, whoever makes it. And I put it inside my RODI system, and now it's taken care of. But they didn't have a way to test for it. So how do they know it's being taken care of? How do they know if they have a problem? How do they know if it's solving the problem? All they know is they bought a filter that swears it could do it, and they put it in, and they don't know what it's actually doing or how long it'll last. And just because you buy it and it's, let's say it's good, quote unquote, for 6 months, it might be good for 14 months for one guy that's a 29-gallon tank, and it might be good for 8 weeks for someone with a 400-gallon tank. I mean, we need to know via a test. So we want to test for chloramines, and it's just not a simple test. It's just not easy, like measuring nitrate or phosphate or something. So usually what happens is you have to use something like a free chlorine test kit and then do some kind of calculations to determine chloramines. I can tell you that the product from Seachem called Prime, P-R-I-M-E, locks up chlorine and chloramine. So if you were using tap water for your aquarium and you put in Prime, you're taking care of it anyway. And when we have really bad droughts here in Texas, and they say you can't water your lawn and you got to save water, and don't wash your car in the driveway. I mean, when they get super strict, they are dumping in all kinds of crap into our drinking water here in the city. And myself and the fish store down the street actually did the exact same thing. We made our RODI water, and as soon as it was full, we poured in the Prime to make sure we were safe. And we were talking about months later, and I'd mentioned, yeah, I've been doing that this summer because of the drought. And he looked me in the eye and said, really? I've been doing that this summer because of the drought too. And we never discussed it. We both just felt we needed to do it, and neither one of us had issues. His store didn't have problems. His customers that bought his water didn't have problems. My reef never skipped a beat. I didn't even worry about it. And once the drought was gone and all the rains came and the water was, you just knew that things were back to normal at the water plant, then I went back to not putting Prime in my water. So it's just something that people are very concerned about, but it's like being worried about ozone radiation without being able to measure the ozone. We're just like, oh no, ozone radiation outside. And so you just like run from shady spot to shady spot. I mean, you don't have any facts. It's all just fear. So instead of sweating it, I mean, here's the thing. If you really want to remove chloramine from your system, the simplest way is a 75-gallon-a-day membrane, because that's 3 gallons an hour, and 2 10-inch carbon block filters. So, and if you want, you could have 1 block and you could have 1 loose carbon, like GAC. And so the water goes through sediment, it goes through the block, it goes through the GSC, it goes through the membrane. It's going to come out chloramine free. Only way it wouldn't is if chloramine is like insanely high. Like if it was 6 ppm or something. The city of Fort Worth, their annual water report comes back around 2 ppm, so it's a very low number. So if you had 1 gallon every 20 minutes going through 20 inches of carbon, it should remove the chloramine. But a lot of people want 100 gallons a day, 150 gallons a day, 300 gallons a day, and they're moving the water so quickly, it can't suck out the chloramine quickly enough because the water's passing through it so fast. You have to have 20 minutes of contact time on 20 inches of carbon. There are long housings that are 20 inches tall where you can have one 20-inch carbon housing. You could hook that up. If you ran it after the DI as a preventative to remove chloramine that may have come through the RODI system, your TDS will go up because water running through carbon adds TDS. So that's why it goes before the membrane. Also, if you're running something like GAC, it has to be rinsed because the dust coming off the GAC would go into your membrane and plug it up and clog it, and water can't get out, which means no water is getting in because it's barely coming out. So there's a lot of things to consider. But the bottom line is you need to know how much chloramine you even have in your area through some kind of a water report or through the city's annual report, which is, you know, I've always kind of felt like the annual report that we were given, it's sort of like when I used to work in fast food, you know, we worked every day. We did the same thing every day. We flipped burgers, we mopped floors, we cleaned the bathroom, right? But when the district manager was coming, we had to make the place glow. It had to be so shiny. Every trash can had to be empty. You know, everything had to be perfect. And I kind of feel like the city water report is the same thing. They'll spend a week making everything as perfect as possible so that it can get this great report. And then after that, for the next 11 and a half months, we get whatever they're going to give us. Now, that's just me being a little paranoid, but it's possible. I don't know. Maybe they do a great job and it's always great. And this is just 1 week out of the year that they send in a sample and it always is the same. But I have my doubts, so. But, you know, I've been in this hobby a long time and I haven't anything weird happen to my tanks. So that's a long answer to you, Neil, for the chloramine question. Brian, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Oh, and another one saying, you do so much for us. Hope this helps with the shipping. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just to let you guys know, I don't know if you care. Each one of those ones that I mailed is costing me $3.80. There's no cheap mailing. I went to the post office and said, it's just a magazine. Do I get print or book rate? And he said, no, because there's ads in it. And I was like, oh. So it was $3.20 each, and I had to buy the manila envelopes too, so it cost about $3.80. That's okay. Once they're gone, I'm done doing it. But thank you, Brian, for chipping in a little bit. That was nice of you. Chris says, your water tank with Marilyn Monroe looking above it's going to make the water hot. That's funny. This was a gift from my son years ago, and so I've always had it in this room. And, you know, somehow it's not gotten any damage. It's not even, you know, like sometimes humid areas, the pictures get kind of wrinkly. This is still nice and smooth. I should clean the glass on it. But, no, she's been in the room since the room went up. So she's been here a long time. Scott says hello from Scotland. And another person with no name, just 2 dashes, is visiting from Germany. Ben says, how do you manage trace elements? Well, Prodibio has a share of things in it. My calcium reactor media has some trace elements in it. Acropower has amino acids in it. And then, what's it called? Coral Vits is a bunch of different vitamins. But I'm not actually like adding the official bottle of trace elements like we see so many on the shelves in the fish store. But now with new saltwater, there's going to be trace elements in every single batch. So that'll take care of that as well. Neil says, are you saying tangs are sensitive to nitrate? No, I'm saying that maybe the nitrate level coming down will yield better results because it's just better water quality overall. I mean, when she looked at my entire system, she even admitted, she said, you know, your system is a huge step up from the hobbyists I deal with on a regular basis. And she said, you really are in tune with your tank. You know what's going on. You're testing your water all the time. You're using high quality food. The only thing that you're not doing is you're not changing water, which I don't like. And she goes, I want you to do that. And your nitrates are much too high. And she says, I want you to have those nitrates under 20. Hell, I'd love them to be under 20 as well. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be wild if once my nitrates are down under 20 and staying there, if the cold tank just coal tang starts to look better and better. I mean, it could take a long time, but I have seen an example of a fish that suffered from nitrate back in the day when I bought my 55-gallon system used back in 2003. The nitrates were 200, and there was a coral beauty, and one side of its face was just gray, just all gray, no color. It just looked burned, like someone poured oil, hot oil on it. And I got the nitrates way down, and kept the tank stable and fed her good food all the time. And I'd say about 9 months later, maybe a little bit longer, but I feel like it was 9. I'd have to check my records. Her face was completely back to normal. You never would have known there was an issue. It was amazing. I mean, I saw it during the period. I was like, wow, it looks like it's getting less. And so I kind of actively kept an eye on her. And then, after all those months, like, what do you know? It's like gone. That's amazing. So what if the coal has the same sensitivity to nitrate that I'm not aware of, where the yellow and the purple and Spock don't really care? I don't know. The hippo also, no issue. Even, the vet said, your hippo's gorgeous. And she did not say, you need to get it out of that tank. So the plan is the hippo will be caught and put into the frag tank, and hopefully the little bullied yellow will get pulled out and put in the frag tank. And then in the frag tank, I have a coral beauty, and it'll go in the reef. And then there's a damsel in there, and there's a few clowns. So there'll be a mixture of fish in the frag tank, and there will be no hippo in the anemone cube that's behind this wall. That's what that plumbing is that's going to the anemone cube. And we'll see. We'll see. I'm not saying that it's definite, but whenever anything is slightly off, it can affect a creature, a living animal. It can affect them. Now, it doesn't. The one thing that we did not see, and the vet was very clear to notice this, she says, there's not a systemic problem that's across all the fish. You literally have one fish with the one thing, you got this fish with that thing, you got this other one with the eye. There's no correlation. They don't all have an eye problem. This one's completely healthy, and there's a yellow tang that's gorgeous, and then you have a yellow tang that doesn't look as good. It's crazy. You'd think they'd look the same, they'd have the same situation. So I was saying to her, I think it's constantly being chased. It's always being stressed. I think that yellow tang is not looking well. And I said, I'm thinking about catching it and moving into this tank. And she says, that's a great idea. And wouldn't it be interesting to see if it did improve on its own just from getting away from being chased? So it's on my list of things that are going to happen this year. Scott, I'm trying to understand your question. Are there any good, easy-ish, something bright red or orange corals for the sand bed? Wavy? You mean corals that move? If you're wanting reds and oranges, there's a red gorgonian. Needs to be fed. It'll be really pretty. They have white polyps. I think there's one that's red with yellow polyps. You can get Rickordia, you can get zoanthids in all these different colors. Those all have movement, so they're pretty. And then you have other things that don't move as much. I mean, they have some movement, but it's very subtle. Like the polyp just kind of vibrates a little bit. It's not like moving. And that would be things like scolies and acans and micromusa. And then finally, on the front of my tank, I have some really pretty things down on the sand that are chalices. And they have no movement at all. So those are some where you get some color down on the sand bed. And then, of course, clams come in many colors. Red, I don't believe I've seen, but I've seen black with a really bright blue. There's been actually quite a variety, but I haven't looked at clams in a long time, so I'm just operating off of memory. But if you go to a vendor that sells clams, like ORA, go to their website and just look at what they have, because they have a lot of different kinds. And then you can have your fish store order what you like. Those are some suggestions I have. Mike says that if I want to get these nitrates down, I have to sift my sand. So we'll see. We'll see, sir. We will see. T-shirt idea. Spock's a 5. I love that. I actually was thinking about we had to use that somehow. I didn't think T-shirt. I was almost thinking a coaster or something, because at some point we have to order new coasters. Ooh, a fire hose reel on a hinge. That's kind of a cool idea. I didn't think of that. Thank you. That's a good one. I think the water hose holder hanging on the wall, it might work. Maybe. I mean, we're looking at that. Let me switch cameras again. So technically, yeah, possibly. If the hanger was down here, the hose could be like this. So I would just have a loop that kind of, well, actually, because of the elbow, I can point the elbow slightly this way and then have it come down and loop. Yeah, maybe it could go on here, down low. It'll stick out about this far. So, I don't know. That might work. I just keep picturing it here. That's why I'm debating. I kind of like this spot. So, it kind of makes sense too because it protects this. If this is in my way and there's a, some kind of way of holding it, like even if it's some kind of a wooden board with the hose hanger mounted and then double stick taped to the barrel so it stays, it's less likely this could get kicked. I mean, it never has, but you never know when something's going to happen. But yeah, thank you for some of the suggestions you're making. Let's see. Oh, another thing I thought about, and this is kind of what Jason was suggesting, use a simple shelf hook for tools and hold it in place with a ratchet strap. I thought about putting a strap around the barrel and then connect whatever the hanger is on that strap, to seat belt it on there. But I was actually wondering if by any chance putting that strap here with a pressure of water, if it's going to do some weird like seat belt impression and actually weaken my barrel because it's snug. I guess it just depends how tight I make that. So but that was one I thought of as well. So good thinking. Might work perfectly actually, don't know. Aw, Marine Life says, this is my favorite channel. Thanks. Oh, NoPox was such a nightmare. If you go back to all my streams, you'll hear me complain about it so much. I didn't care that I was adding it. What I cared about was the slime that appeared everywhere. In my sump, in my vortex, in my return pump, on the strainers, in the overflow box. It was all over my mine stream. It was everywhere. And I was constantly cleaning it out of my system. And it was such a beating. And it wasn't like I was watching nitrates go down. I was just having slime. And I couldn't stop it from happening. And I used 6 bottles worth at least over probably an 8-month period. And I just got sick of it. I was like, I'm done. And I had to then taper it off so I didn't just go cold turkey and shock the reef. What a mess. No, that one I'm not happy with. Electro says, what's your favorite fish and why? Well, I really love the mandarins. That is the top of my list because of the look. They're so delicate, the way they move, the way they swim, when there's a pair and they do their little mating dance. I mean, they're just beautiful. So that's been kind of my favorite fish for a very long time. And I don't actually have one at this time. So at some point I'd like to do it. I was talking with Tulio about Reef Enhance, which is their food. And he said, if you really use that food like 3 times a week, 4 times a week for about 3 weeks, you will see so many pods in your tank. And at that point, that'd be the perfect time to introduce a mandarin. So it's interesting. Okay, I'm going to put this on the screen because it's funny. His name is Useless Reefer, and he wrote, dang, I'm late. And the irony is just screaming out at me. It so matches the name. That's great. What a funny name to pick. Michael Harvey, I don't necessarily skip comments. Sometimes I haven't gotten to them yet because I'm always about 20, 30 minutes behind the conversation because I'm busy telling a story and you guys just keep going and I haven't had a chance to even look at the conversation. I'm not doing a read the comment as they come live. I'm always behind. So if you feel left out, just keep hitting me up and eventually I'll see it. Let's see. Reefing for fun, thank you so much for the super chat. And hello to you too. Oh, that's nice. Kay Miller got his wow. I got 3 55-gallon drums for $55 off Facebook. That's a great deal. That's less than $20 a piece. That's awesome. I actually bought my blue barrels for $20 each from a farm store. And when I got them, they had held Dr. Pepper syrup. Oh, the smell, that sweetness, took forever to get out of the barrels. It was really bad. But I've had them for a long time. And they still look like the day, I mean, every once a year or so, like this week, I clean them really good so they look brand new again. And they're just so durable. They're awesome. And I've even lent them out to people and gotten them back. I mean, they're just really great. Trent says, if I throw a bunch of dry rock in my sump to seed it for a new tank, how bad does it throw your tank off, pulling it all out suddenly? Well, number one, I wouldn't do any of that. I would absolutely not do any of that. I would take your rock that's dry and put it in a barrel of salt water with a huge pump for lots of good circulation and just let that thing simmer for a few weeks or months. I would not put it into the tank. If after 4 weeks in salt water and you test and everything seems to be coming back good, you're not getting any weird surprises like some kind of a cycle, you could then take that rock that's been circulating in salt water for a month, now put it in your sump to help seed it, and then you could use it in your new tank. Or you can just take your water, you could just take the rock that's in the barrel circulation, change the water, put in some live rock enhance once or once or twice a week for the next few weeks. So 4 weeks in salt water. Now we're going to do 4 more weeks using live rock enhance, and then just put it in the tank. And that's it. Don't even worry about putting it in your sump and affecting your existing reef. Glenn says, when buying RO water, how long can it remain in the containers before using it? I sometimes leave some for 2 weeks before it's all used up, but I'm not sure if this is too long. RO water should be in a sealed container, and it's good for up to 30 days. Salt water can actually last longer in a sealed container, but usually everyone just sticks to the rule of 30 days. Because it's stagnant. It's just in a sealed container. It's like a jar of spaghetti sauce. You know, even those have an expiration date on the side, right? So general rules, 30 days in a jug. 2 weeks is no problem. 4 weeks is fine. Try to keep it in a cool, dark place. You don't want it sitting like near the tank where the sunlight's hitting it and algae's growing in there. And those jugs need to be cleaned from time to time too. Because, you know, when the jug was brand new and you fill it with water, the water is super low TDS. But now if you're buying RO water, you should measure and see what the TDS is coming out of the jug. You can, wherever you're getting your water, you can collect a sample in something clean, or you can measure it on the spot in the fish store with your own TDS meter. Then you can put it in your jug and now measure and see what it is. And again, it's just like the brute barrels. If the jug isn't clean, it's adding TDS. You need to do a bleach and water rinse. Just shake it all around, get it all shook around because you can't get into the jug. It's only got an opening this big. And just bleach water it. Rinse it really well, let it air dry for 24 hours in the sunlight, and then next time you put RO water and you measure it, you should have a nice low number again. I'm trying to understand this one. Matty Ice says, why not just keep the one valve to the water change that goes toward the bottom, then you never have to switch open and close valves. I don't know what you're asking. One valve toward the bottom. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe explain it to me again. Sorry. Mr. Reefbuster says, is it normal for a new cycled nanotank to show zero phosphate? My Chaetomorpha is dying. Should I feed more food to increase phosphate? Your newly cycled nanotank probably had dry sand and dry rock, so there's no nutrients whatsoever. So yes, zero phosphate. Your Chaetomorpha died because there's no nutrients. It's too soon for a refugium. When you get a tank that's just cycled, there's nothing in there for the plants to feed off of, to thrive upon. So you need to let the tank, you cycle it, you add some livestock, then you add your cleanup crew to keep it from getting algae, and then after another month or so, you could then possibly incorporate a refugium with some fresh Chaetomorpha. Also, how long are you running the lights on the refugium? Because Chaetomorpha does not need 24 hours of light. So that could also be contributing to his death. But I would guarantee the low phosphate, low nitrate, low nutrient, brand new cycled tank is probably the problem. There's just nothing there for them to eat on. Catherine says, I currently have a 36 gallon setup and I'm running the basic necessities, but I'm setting up 125 gallons soon. What would you suggest as necessary gadgets? I'm having a hard time deciding. Oh man, I like everything. I would say I would definitely recommend a controller. The Apex controller is an excellent device to help you run everything on your tank and keep track of parameters. It's a very expensive gadget at $800, but and it's very exponential. You can keep adding pieces to it and add more and more features. But I think any tank should have an Apex on there. So there is a smaller version that costs less. It's about $500, and you can still expand upon it. And that would be the #1 gadget. And then I would say a waste collector for your protein skimmer would be my second gadget. I love a waste collector because it turns off the protein skimmer when the waste collector is full. And mine is plugged into my Apex. So you see Apex waste collector work hand in hand. I would like those two gadgets. And then I guess I would probably be looking at getting some kind of dosing pumps so you don't have to manually dose things. Those would be my top 3 gadgets I'd recommend from that question. Crisscross says, I thought you were going to Texas Coral Fest. I wonder if I was going to see you there. I bought an Elegance coral for $40. Congratulations. Nope, I didn't make that trip. I knew it was happening today. I also knew I had a live stream today. And I have enough events I'm going to each year. I just don't go to them all. I've got a trip to Niagara Falls coming up. I've got a trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma coming up. I've got a big trip to Phoenix coming up. I got one to San Diego. What else? There's a local event here called Aquashella that's happening soon. I'll be going to that in Dallas. So trying to stay put and not travel as much this year compared to last year. And while I know I could have driven there and back, I'm not shopping for corals, so it's kind of like, why am I going other than just to walk around and see what other people are selling? I don't know. It just didn't have a need. I've been to it before. I remember going, and the guy that runs it, he was like, Mark, you came, I can't believe it. And I hung around for, I don't know, 45 minutes, and I left. And I wasn't even shopping. Where am I going to put anything? So I just didn't go. Mad Hatter's Reef asks, I think he's talking to me, what are you testing with? I use ELOS test kits mainly. Oh, he might be answering someone else. Never mind. Never mind. That conversation was not pointed to me. Tammy, I'm placing an order on Monday with them. I've got the price list on my computer now. And then I'll get that food sent to you. I'll probably send you 2 to make up for your wait. I've been hoping for the MaxiJet pumps to come in, so I've been kind of dragging my feet a little bit on that order. But I got to place an order because I need a bunch of stuff from them. Let's see. Tim says, how are your nitrates lately? Would you consider trying Reef Active along with the new algae scrubber? I would probably focus on the algae scrubber. I try not to combine multiple things because then I can't figure out what solved it. That's why I was using the brick. That's why I was using Nopox. I was trying different things that say they can do it because I want to see if it can do it so I can then say it works great. And so far I haven't had much luck. Week after week for the last few weeks I've been measuring my nitrate and it was around 30. Of course, the day the vet showed up, her test kit said 80. Mine said 60, and nothing had been done on the tank to change it. I have no idea why the number suddenly jumped up for no reason whatsoever between Saturday's test and Wednesday. That makes 0 sense. Matter of fact, I even fed less because the vet said don't feed the fish after noon today, because she wanted them hungry and she didn't want them pooping in the water when she showed up. So I don't know why they were up. I was really shocked. So they were up. Trent says, does the salt water draining down your driveway leave a noticeable mark on the concrete? No, not at all. I've never seen anything that you could tell that anything had happened a few hours earlier. It just flows down the driveway and goes away. Jamie says, I saw your post on Facebook, and I also put it here on YouTube, asking about tap water temperature. What was your reason for asking, and was it tank related? I recently made a post on Milo's Reef, which is my business page on Facebook, which is this link right here. So facebook.com/Milo's Reef is my business page. And then within that page is the community group Club Milo's Reef, which would be, no, I always do that, this. And on the business page, I was sharing pictures of this, filling it up, explaining it takes a long time to fill up this time of year because the water is so cold coming out of the pipes. And there were a couple of people that were surprised and almost debating me, like, why would you say it's coming out colder? You're in the city. That makes no sense. And I know for a fact the water is colder. When I wash my hands, the water is icy cold, and yet in the summer, it's coming out warm. I can tell when I'm brushing my teeth in summer versus winter. When I take a shower, I use a lot of hot water. In the summer, I'm using way less hot water for the same shower. You know, it's just, it comes out hotter out of the pipes in the summer here in Texas. And so I thought, you know what? I want to know what everyone's water temperature is out of their tap today. And I actually started a spreadsheet. I got 30 people entered so far. And the lowest temperature that was posted was 35 degrees in Wisconsin. 35 degrees coming out of the pipe. So cold. So I want to do the exact same measurement again in August when it's the heat of summer, and we'll do the exact same check again, and we'll see where we're at. And I'm very interested to see what the numbers are. And I thought, you know, instead of just focusing only on my area, let's kind of do something across the nation. And you know what? There's a few people in there from Canada, from the UK, from Germany. They also chimed in. So as more numbers come in, I'll keep adding to the list. And then I put a reminder in Reef Trace to remind me on like the 12th, which is a Wednesday when I knew I'd be home, of August, where we're going to all measure our water again and see what it is in the summer. Because the point is, when the water's coming out warmer out of your pipes, your RODI system runs faster, or it's more efficient. It's much harder for an RO system to process cold water. And those membranes that are in the RODI system are they're rated for 76 degrees. That's how they come up with a number. At 76 degrees with a TDS of less than 200, you should get 100 gallons a day. But when the water coming out of the pipe is 50 degrees, it becomes a 50-gallon-a-day membrane because it's so cold. It still does the job. It's still 98% rejection rate, but it's so much slower. It's because it's processing through cold water. So I did not measure how long it took to fill this up this time, unfortunately. I did find out that every inch was an hour. So basically, it looks like this time of year, 78.5 hours to fill it up, if I'm just using the math. And then that would be over 3 days, right? Yeah. And then in the summer, I'm pretty sure I can fill this up in 2 days flat. So we're going to find out in the summer what the temperature is. But I wanted to kind of just log the temperature today, and then I wanted to see where we are in 6 months. That was the reason for my query on Facebook. Tim says, why don't you just go out and buy yourself a few corals because you deserve it? If you guys recall, last year I did that. I bought a lot of corals. As a matter of fact, I had a lot of vendors like, wow, I sold a coral to Mark. Because with a tank with big corals, there's usually no room. And, you know, I'll give you guys kind of a rear view right now of the reef, because we got some white light happening right now. Let's switch this. So these are actually some of the, see, it looks so ugly right now. White light instead of blue light. But there's a whole row of frags, 1, 2, 3, 4, and even a little one down there, number 5, that have been quietly growing for the last 9 months, 10 months. That's my green Walt Disney that has no, not that, I pointed the wrong thing. That's Bird's Nest right here. Right to its left is the Walt Disney hiding there behind a frag. And it's kind of hard to make out, but it ain't pretty. So there's some frags there. There's some frags down here I got from my friend Ryan. And one that for some reason is just turning white and I have no idea why. I think that some fish are chewing on it the way it's eroding. This one's healthy and this one's healthy and there's one behind it. So there's some frags need to be moved. And then this end of the tank is got a little bit more of the blue hue right now. You can see the toadstool leather is just getting bigger and bigger against the glass. You can see some of the sea bay, you can see some of the hammers, you can see the gorgonian. Tim says, I've wondered why you don't have any Scolies. I assume you like them. Yes. Yeah, they're pretty. Usually I just don't spend the money on them. They're kind of expensive. Beerus has some kind of test strip. I think it's for free chlorine or something. It is for the principle of getting down to your chloramines. I just wish there was an official chloramine test kit. Michael Patterson, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Tim says, what were some of your favorite TV shows when you were a kid? Well, I was a huge cartoon fan. Loved cartoons. And so I watched all the Hanna-Barbera and the Looney Tunes stuff. I watched a lot of Disney. I love Disney. So there was that. And then, of course, there's TV shows as I got a little older that I enjoyed, like Dukes of Hazzard and The Bionic Man, or The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman. Those a couple old ones. Anchor, great name, says, use screws, not tape. Well, I can't screw into my poly tank because it'll drain all the water out. But if I can screw into something solid that's not my poly tank, that would be nice. The Briar Patch says to me, what's up with this shirt? Talk about your escape room experience, LOL. Well, I can't. They actually told us, please don't tell anyone, what you did, so that way they can have this, the experience that you did, where you don't know in advance what the puzzles are. And that makes sense. I mean, I've only done it once, and we did one room, and it was a gambling scenario. And the idea at the end was to open up a big safe, which we didn't do. We couldn't quite solve it, but we did get the door open, which was our primary goal. The safe would have given us enough chips to beat another team doing the exact same competition on the other, behind the wall we were working. So basically, I think it was like mirrored challenges, and there was 6 people in there and 6 people in ours, and we were working our way through it. And it was really cool. I really enjoyed it. It's not a cheap experience. I think it cost something like $80 a person or $125 a person or something. And we were in there for about an hour, but it was a lot of fun, and it encourages teamwork. You're not in there just doing it by yourself. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So if you haven't done it yet, I would definitely recommend giving it a shot, especially if you're a puzzle person. Let's see. Marcus Reeve, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. He said, I'm doing this for the chat and to help cover shipping so someone can get a cool magazine. Happy Saturday, everyone. Thank you very much, Marcus. That's nice of you. And Insane Reefer gave us a super chat as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You really are insane. Let's see. I've already answered that. Manny says, I think he's asking if you can have these things together to dose Nopox and Prodibio at the same time. His nitrates are highest, phosphates are 0.03, we're very low. Yeah, I mean, I dosed Prodibio while I was dosing Nopox. And I also, I used Live Rock Enhance, and so there was different things in my system at the same time. And maybe the Live Rock Enhance in conjunction with the Nopox was part of the reason I was getting this horrible slime. But it was so bad. I showed you guys some pictures and some video. It was awful. And Kim asked, how did things go with Spock? Spock is completely back to normal. Matter of fact, when she went back in the tank, on her right flank, there was like 3 little white dots from whatever, either handling or some kind of chemical or something. But by the next day, it was completely gone. And that same night, I mean, she was swimming around. She didn't go into the trap again. I left the trap in a little bit longer. I was really curious to see if anything would go in now that the vet was getting ready to leave. And of course, I did have a couple fish finally swim into it, but they weren't the ones we wanted anyway, so it didn't matter. And she'd already packed up all her gear, so that visit was done. But Spock was ready to eat that night. She didn't seem to bother her whatsoever. She wasn't being shy. She wasn't hiding in a corner for 3 days. It was like all was well. This question has too many abbreviations in it. What do you recommend WRT, minimum stored RO and saltwater volume compared to the tank? Oh, are you basically saying how much you should have on hand at any time as availability? I would think that you're going to want to have, well, you need to have enough RO water for top off. And that's really the only time you need RO water anyway. So you need enough of that for your top off for the tank for like a week and a half, 10 days. And then your saltwater vat should be as big as you can get. If you can have I'm sure one large enough for water change is convenience. But if you wanted to have more water on hand, like what if you had a quarantine tank and you had to keep changing water every day on that quarantine tank to keep the water healthy? You need to have an abundance of water so you can just keep changing water constantly while the fish is going through treatment. So you want to have a nice solid amount of water. But percentage-wise, I don't have one for you. You're just going to have to decide what fits your room or your closet or your basement or in the garage or the workshop, whatever it is you've got going on. But, the more you have, I feel, is the better. And especially those that are doing, if I was changing 7 gallons a day on this tank automated, that's 210 gallons a month. This would be a month's worth of water, right? Give or take. And it would just be changing 7 gallons every single day quietly. So, in that case, that would be big enough for my automatic water changes. But I don't do that. Float Serve says, do we want large pipes after all hose barbs on pumps or just when connecting to a pump? Did not fully understand. Is the pipe after the barb not the barb itself, right? Okay, so if you are using a hose barb, it's to use a certain type of hose that you have already. So if you have a 1-inch hose barb, you're going to use 1-inch tubing going up. That's what it is. If you wanted a larger pipe on top using flexible tubing, you would want a larger hose, larger hose barb. So like let's say the pump output is 1 inch. If you could put a union on there that jumps to 1.5 inches, you could put a large fitting with a 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches hose barb, and you can use 1.5 inch flexible hose. But it's usually easier to use PVC pipe when you're doing these type of things, like I did on mine. I went straight from the pump, from the union. I increased it and went with a large pipe all the way up, and then I reduced it when I had to, which was right before the valves. So that's what we're talking about. The hose barb, my point of the hose barb is that anytime you use a hose barb, the inside gets smaller and smaller. You start off with a 1-inch pipe, then you got to jam this into the 1-inch pipe, And now it's already smaller, and then you've got a hole even smaller than the plastic that the fitting is made of. So you're down to 3/4 of an inch maybe in that area. So there's a lot of loss. You're creating a restriction. And so anything can be enlarged to get more flow through it is ideal, at least for the point of going up. And then when you have to reduce down, you just do. Logan says, can a heater be placed horizontally in a tank? I'm trying to hide it a bit. Yes, you can. A lot of heaters will be will be marked saying don't get the top wet, but most of them can be fully submerged because they're going to get wet. When you do a water change, you're exposing more heater, dangerous, make sure it's unplugged. And if your heater was in the sump with the top extended above the water for that top couple of inches, and then you turned off the return pump, the sump fills up with more water, that top's going to be submerged anyway. So unless there's something adamant about that heater that says it absolutely, I mean, there's certain heaters that are designed to hang on the back of the tank with a clip. Those, the tops can't get wet. I mean, they categorically can't. But most of the submersible heaters, you can submerge the entire thing. And so, yeah, you should be able to lie it down behind your rockwork. Marcus was saying for any pump that uses the output or input size, it was designed that way to meet specs. It's not actually true. If you take a pump, a mag pump, with a 1-inch outlet, with no plumbing, and put it in a barrel of water, it will do what they said to spec. But as soon as you screw a pipe on there, it's going to change the dynamics completely. And every fitting you have above it, couplings, unions, ball valves, check valve, lock line, elbows, 45s, T's, everything changes the gallons per hour coming out. And this is not some secret. This has been well known for a long time that you want to increase the pipe coming off of a pump when you're using it as a return pump. And at some point I will do a study on it, and I'll give you guys some real life numbers, and that way you can see for yourselves and decide if you want to make any changes. Marcus says that his water is 58 degrees year round. Where are you located where it never changes? I mean, I realize it's coming from well, but still. Just Another Nanotank says, Mark's website was the first website I came across when I Googled how to cycle a reef tank. His website kept me up for hours. The website then led me to YouTube, which is where I found everyone else. Well, thanks for sharing your story with us. Insane Reefer says it took me 2 days to fill up my 180-gallon tank with a 150-gallon-a-day RODI system. So you see, if it's 150, then in 2 days he should have made 300 gallons of water, and yet it took 2 days to only make 180. So you can see it slowed down. What is your water temperature, Insane Reefer? Michael Patterson says, what do you think about using or doing an automatic water change with the Apex dose? That's what a lot of people are doing. They're setting up theirs to do that, and they're drawing water from a reservoir, and they're pumping water out to another reservoir or to a nearby drain. Thank you, Gordy. I appreciate you tuning in for the live stream. Okay. Unfiltered Reefer says, what are your thoughts on the new Radeon G5 lights? It's about damn time. We have been waiting for Gen 5s to come out much too long. Those Gen 4s have got to have been out for 3 or 4 years. And I just kept thinking, a 5 is coming. And you know, a year ago, I was helping my client plan this tank. And I said, don't buy lights yet. I just know it. If we buy Gen 4s, in a matter of a few months, you're going to have 5s come out. You're going to have a generation ago, which is years ago, of LED technology on your tank. And he needs a lot of light fixtures. And I was like, I want to hold out for the new ones. And the tank's still not running, so that worked out. He hasn't bought any lights, and now the Gen 5's dropped, and we can go ahead and order him a ton of lights. And when I say a ton, we're looking at 28 fixtures, probably. So it's a big deal. Jeff asked me a question, but I'm not sure what we're talking about. He said, do you think they recommend tank size listed on the website is too conservative? I don't know what the conversation was. Are we talking about tank size for a certain fish? Sometimes they're conservative, sometimes they are accurate. But I don't know if I answered your question. Can you kind of, if you're still here, can you explain that to me? And thank you very much for the super chat, Gordy. Appreciate that. Marcus says, why is there a thumbs down? Someone did that in the first 6 minutes of this conversation. I don't know what I said wrong. I can never make everyone happy. It's unbelievable. Okay, good. So I did answer your question accurately. Okay, great. I'm glad that helped. Mass is just following up. He said, that's what I wanted to know. I thought, let's say the system contains 120 gallons, so having a 60 gallons on hand would give me a 50% water change. In the worst case, I have 50% water change can be done. The other thing in a worst case is if your tank leaks, you can put that 50 gallons, or that 50 gallons itself, could have your livestock go into it. You can move the fish into it, and any corals, it won't be fun. You can kind of stack it up, or if you can get a feeding trough, you can pump that 60 gallons into the trough, or some temporary aquarium you got your hands on, and move the livestock there while you're dealing with the big leak. I've lived through that twice, so I know what that's like. And so having that water isn't always necessary for water change. Sometimes it's rescue water, just to have a huge vat of water to move everything into before you start mopping, you know? All right. Alto Ho says, where's the Clarisy video? I tried Vaseline on the used fleece side this time and hopefully have an easier time with roll replacement. You know, I completely disassembled mine and cleaned it, and I fed the fabric through from scratch. You know, like the idea is that when you have an old fleece going through the Clarisy, and probably with the other ones too, while there's still some fabric left, you can staple the new fleece to the last of the old roll and let it feed through past the staples. And then you can cut it off and kind of spool it. And that way it feeds through automatically. But since I completely disassembled mine and scrubbed it down completely so there was no coralline, no algae on it, no salt creep, no spatter, then I had to push the fleece in, and again, that was not fun. And I put it through, and when I was done, it was backwards, and I had to remove it because just like the toilet paper roll in your house, it has to be facing the correct direction for it to work right. So I had to make that connection. But Vaseline on the fleece, that's funny. Ryan, thank you very much for the compliment. You said it's interesting. I hope that's a good interesting. Kevin, I'm really glad those dosing containers are working out for you. Masson says, is it possible to use the salinity probe in a saltwater station and use the Apex auto feeder filled with salt to adjust salinity, with the Apex monitoring and keeping it topped up all the time? Wow. I don't think so. It needs a lot of salt. I mean, if you were doing a little tiny 1 gallon container and you had to sprinkle in a little bit of salt to maintain salinity, yeah, but a big container, the auto feeder doesn't have enough room for enough salt, and salt can clump once it's exposed to air. So I don't think you're going to find a workaround to avoid the clumping of the salt before it falls into the container. There is someone in Granbury, which is south of me about 45 minutes, where he is using the Apex and the salinity probe in a big barrel, and he's doing something. I think he adds all the salt and has a circulation pump, but I think he's oversalting, which is what we never want to do. He's doing it. And then he uses the salinity probe to determine how much RO water needs to be added to get the salinity back down to the desired level. But you see, usually when you put a lot of salt in and then add water, you precipitate out some of the important elements and you lose those. So I don't know. I mean, if he just over mixes it, like let's say the container has 150 gallons of water and he dumps in a box that makes 200 gallons of water and salinity is 1.039, and then he has the solenoid on the RO system trickling in RO water until it drops to 1.026. You know, maybe that kind of thing would work, but I don't think you can do anything with the auto feeder. It's just too darn small to accomplish what you're trying to do. Okay, I'm gonna just, I know you're not talking to me, but it's in my live chat. So it says, he says, I'm very scared to attempt to raise my nitrate and phosphate from 0. Do not fear phosphate and nitrate. They are not evil. We just don't want absolute 0. And if you keep them down that low, you end up dealing with all kinds of issues. So let's avoid the issues and have a little phosphate and a little bit of nitrate. There's nothing wrong with that. Oh, by the way, we were talking about the Gen 5s, and I mentioned I was excited. Yes, I really like the look of them. I like the spread. I like that the price didn't change and that all the mounts that have existed still work with the new light. So if you are upgrading, you're going to have, you can still use your RMS kit or your hanging cables or whatever you're going to use. Or if you've bought the new XHO kit that fits the old Radeon, it'll fit the new Radeon, which is good. I really am happy that they didn't change anything dimensionally, and I'm really glad that the price didn't jump up. And the new Gen 5 Radeons work with Mobius, so you can do all your programming right there on your phone, and then hit commit, and boom, it's done. So the Mobius app is communicating with the Versa now, and will communicate with a brand new Gen 5 Radeons, and then later it'll probably, I mean, why not? It should eventually be able to talk to Vortex and to Vectra pumps and all that. So that's all in the works. Sky High Reef says, what's the cheapest way to set up an auto water change station for a 100-gallon system? Well, you need a couple containers that hold water. One will be full of salt water and one will be empty, because you're pumping water out as you're pumping water in, right? Or you have to send it to a drain somewhere. There's a company called Auto Aqua, A-U-T-O-A-Q-U-A, and they have a very simple gizmo that will pump water out and pump water in. That is probably around $100. Maybe it's 80. I don't know. I saw it for a couple of years at Macna, and it's very simple to set up. You probably could get the whole thing set up in 5 to 10 minutes. And then you're going to need to keep making salt water, you know, make a new batch every so often to keep your automated system going. But that shouldn't be too expensive to do. It's almost DIY, but the automation of the automatic water change system by Auto Aqua should be very affordable. Gordy says, what are the types of pH probes that are from between $10 and $100? Are the top price ones better? There's going to be some lab grade pH probes and ORP probes, and then there's going to be just generic probes. Typically, the generic ones don't last as long as the lab grade. So Apex or Neptune Systems sells lab grade probes. Well, actually, they sell both. They sell the cheap one and they sell the better one for people who want to last longer. I prefer to use lab grade always, but I will not say that I've never bought the cheaper ones. The cheapest I ever found was some company through eBay, and I think you had to buy 2 at a time, and I got like both for like 40 bucks a piece, and they lasted a year or so. So I mean, I was happy. But probes don't last forever. But I think the lab grade will last longer, like 12 to 18 months. So yeah, if you buy dirt cheap probes, like $10, I wouldn't expect anything accurate about it. I would think you're going to spend between 40 and 80 bucks on a decent pH probe. And it just depends who you're buying from. HTJKSA52, I can't figure out how to say any of that, says, I have a question. I'd like to have a large reef tank, 1,000 gallons in my home, but I've never had a reef tank before. So what size do you think I should start with and work my way up? I would start with a 120-gallon tank. And the reason I say that is it's a 4-foot tank by 2 foot by 2 foot. You have enough room in there to work and learn and play. The gear that you're going to put underneath it to maintain that reef will also work with a bigger tank. Some things you're going to have to get bigger, obviously. You'll need a bigger protein skimmer for 1,000 gallons. You'll need a bigger return pump for 1,000 gallons. But for example, if you have 2 lights over the 120, you're only going to need 3 more lights probably, or maybe 6 more. I don't know. It depends how you lay out the lights over the 1,000 gallon. So some of the gear you're using now will work on the bigger tank, but some things won't. Like for example, the Vortec. If I used MP40s on a 120-gallon tank, they won't hold on to a 1,000-gallon tank because the walls of the tank are too thick. So you're choosing or you're dreaming about something really, really big, and it's a lot of work, and it's super expensive. So if you have a budget that can handle that, then learn with a smaller system. You can sell off everything used and use some of that money you collected from the sales to invest into the bigger tank and get the bigger gear. But I would give myself a couple of years of the 120 before I jump to the 1,000, just because otherwise you're going to spend so much money on a 1,000-gallon tank, and you'll run into all these problems because you have zero experience, that you'll be super frustrated, and you'll realize, I just put $20,000 in this project or $30,000 in this project, and I've got nothing to show for it, and all I'm dealing with is problems, and all I see is algae, and the fish I like keep killing each other, and the corals don't do anything. And I can just imagine what that's like, and I would hate for that for you. I basically tell people, if you're trying to set up a reef tank properly, you're looking at $47 a gallon. So 1,000 gallons, you're looking at $47,000. It's a lot of money. So maybe start off with 120 and see how you enjoy the ride. James says, with a mixing station, is there a way to set up pipework inside the barrel to keep the water moving at the bottom to stop salt from settling? Yeah, you can. There's a couple of things you can do. You can create a spray bar, basically. And let's say you had a mag pump in the bottom. I keep using mag because they're big, they last forever, and they have an internal heater. Because of the way they're made, they just make heat. But the output, instead of shooting straight up, you could have it go into a pipe and then a T and then a spray bar with a lot of holes, and it could just be shooting along the bottom. And then a friend of mine, who I believe lives in Houston, showed me this weird looking corkscrew looking plastic gizmo that you put on the end of your pipe, and that would create water spray in the barrel, and that could help. The other thing is take the pump and lie it on its side on the bottom, so as it's sucking water, it's blowing water out in a circular motion. That's another way to melt down the salt. So those are a couple of methods. DV's Reef says, I bought the flipper today after resisting a $40 scraper for too long. What a joy taking off coralline with ease. Yeah, no, it's so nice when you have the right tool for the job. It just makes your life so much easier. Christopher, I kind of answered this earlier, but I'll go into it again. Do you ever clean your saltwater reservoir? It looks like it'd be very difficult to clean since it's so large. Perhaps it's not necessary. No, it absolutely is. And normally my process is once it's almost empty or completely empty, I will then lean it over on its side or actually lay it flat on the floor and I will clean it. My method in the past has been to spray it down with muriatic acid or to pour in a gallon of muriatic acid and then stand back. I'm going to turn off the words here. Actually, I'll use this. This is a good example. So here's my ginormous barrel. And I would pour in the acid, so there's a slick of acid right here. And I would take the barrel and turn it back and forth, and it would slosh up and down. And then I would turn it and slosh it back and forth, and turn it, slosh it back and forth, and turn it, slosh it back and forth, until all the walls had been saturated with the acid. Because as soon as the acid hits it, the stuff on the walls just peels off. You can actually see where the acid hit it off instantly. While I'm doing that, the lid is on the end and it's screwed tight so I don't breathe it because the smell is horrible. It makes it hard to breathe. And then when you're all done, then I can just stand it up and I can take a garden hose and I blast the inside and I have water draining out and going down a tube down the driveway. And that is how I clean it. And I do that about once a year. So it's not an all the time thing. I mean, it's just occasionally. It's the only way I can do it because I cannot get this container out of this room. If I could get it out of the room, I'd do all this cleaning in the driveway and I'd be done much quicker. It's a little more work to drag a garden hose through the front door and into the fish room and then running a drain out through the workshop and down the driveway. But I'm just working with what I got. Insane Reefer says, thank you very much for the super chat. 2 for 2. What are your thoughts on Two Little Fishies Reborn Gone and what will you use next? Okay, so Reborn has been out for about a decade and it is my choice of calcium reactor media. And if you guys recall last summer, I actually used 2 bags of that media as the foundation or the substrate of my refugium. So technically, I could remove that from there and put it in my calcium reactor so I can get by for the rest of the year. I have actually contacted Julian Sprung at Two Little Fishies. He won't give me any specific answers of when we could get it, but he's working on it. I do know that. I know for a fact we're not getting it next week. That I know, because those were his exact words. I said, can I talk about this in the stream? He goes, just don't talk about it. But so I'm not going to, reveal anything. But I do know he's working on it. He's trying to get it. And he's trying to make sure that everything he does is unquestionable. Because if you don't do things the proper way through the proper channels, you can get in trouble, I guess. I don't know anything about that. All I know is we've been using it for many, many years. We're hooked on it. Now it's being taken away. It's like a drug dealer that won't give us our drugs. And we're all like, give me a fix, man. Give me a fix. So I just said, look, we want our media back. We don't want something different. We want Reborn. So hurry up. And, he said, okay. So, I mean, in my head, I'm thinking, well, will it take 8 weeks? Will it take 12 weeks? Will we not get any in 2020? I mean, I don't know the answer to that. But I'm ever the optimist, so I'm going to assume in a couple of months, Reborn's going to come back to the market. In the meantime, I do have the Reborn Little that I mentioned to you guys in a previous stream, which is small. It kind of looks like ARM. And ARM works as well. I used to use ARM before I went to Reborn. So we have that option. There is the calcium reactor media for Destaco calcium reactors. There is the Sassurin media that comes from a Sassurin calcium reactor, which I think that's Egyptian or something. So there are different medias on the market, but I'm actually shocked how many people like Reborn. I mean, I didn't realize how popular it was. I've been using it for a long time, but no one ever talks about it. So it's so funny that everyone seems to be coming out of the woodwork saying, where do I find Reborn? I can't find it. I saw it on your website. Now I don't. And yeah, as soon as I can get more, it'll be in my shop again. And I had one guy said, look, I just want the big giant bucket, which I've never bought. I always buy the 4 kilogram bags, which is 8.8 pounds. And that bag will do my reactor like 1.5 times. So that usually takes care of my tank for, I don't know, 8 months. And I've sold quite a few bags, but I've never tried to get the giant barrel, and I don't think I will. I think the cost of shipping that giant thing to me, plus the cost of shipping that giant thing to you, would be so high you'd rather buy it from someone else. Like if, for example, it shows up on Amazon with free shipping, you're going to do that before you're going to go through all that with me. So But I do plan to carry it again as soon as it comes into stock because I do totally love that stuff. We just have to wait, that's all. But it's not gone forever. If it was gone forever, he would just say, look, just tell everyone we're never getting it again. But he didn't say that. He says he just doesn't know when we're getting it, so he doesn't want to say anything that could mislead people into expecting something. So instead, we're just going to wait. Cryptic says, what is considered a good level of nitrate? My rule of thumb is more than 0 and less than 10. That's a good range. Somewhere, 3 to 10 would probably be good for most livestock. Brian asked a question, but I don't have the answer. He says, I just changed out my DIY resin, which means he packed it himself. And I noticed the second chamber, it was black in color. There was 10 and also a little bit of green. 10? I use BRS color changing DI resin. I think you should talk to BRS and just make sure that you're doing everything right, because I don't know the answer to that one. I sell a color changing resin in a cartridge, and that's how I've always used it myself. I've never done the separation where you have one, cation and anion. I've never done it. And it's just easier to put in one cartridge however often you have to do it. I used to have to change it once every 5 months. Now I'm changing it about once a year. Mine lasts a super long time. I'm very happy with it. But that's because my RO water is so low in TDS, my resin lasts a super long time. So to just change out a cartridge once a year is simple. So I don't know the answers to what you're describing. I don't know why you're having weird colors in there either. That's kind of odd. Mass asks, if someone were to do automatic water changes, would you still have to dose calcium and alkalinity? Depends what the livestock is. If it's a tank full of softies, probably not, because it's going to come with every batch of salt water. But Water Test Saturday is a real thing. So every Saturday we test our water, and if you see your alkaline and your calcium coming down, yeah, you're going to have to keep dosing it a certain amount. Maybe not as much as you used to because you're putting in an infusion of more alkaline and calcium with every water change. But until you do it, you won't know. And you're going to have to stay on top of testing there for a little while. Maybe you have to test twice a week just to make sure everything's good so you don't have any strange variances that could affect other more demanding corals. Puddle Aquatics says, I have a question about your anemone tank, Mark. Do you have the same species in that system or are they mixed? I hear same species NEM tanks are fine, but when getting mixed messages about multiple species and the chemical warfare. Yeah, no, it's all bubble tips. Little ones and big ones. Roses, a tan one. The tan one used to be green. It was light green when I got it, but it turned tan with white tips, and it's beautiful. And the foot is, the body of it is pink. I've had those things forever. I've had them since 2002. And then I have these little ones I call nano NEMs. And they get to be about this big around, maybe a little bit bigger, and then they split. So there's probably 40 or 50 of the small ones in there. And that's what makes the tank look so interesting, because there's so many tentacles. And the clownfish swim through every one of them. And there'll be one little anemone on the corner of the tank, and you'll see a clownfish just lying on it like, this one's mine. And then later on, he's not in it. It's really funny. But they're all bubble tips, and if you try to put a different species in there, you definitely will have allelopathy. I think I'm saying that right. And I had the sea bay anemone that's in my big reef was in that anemone cube, and it was shriveling away. So obviously there was chemical warfare because I removed it and put it in this tank, and it completely healed and turned around and got better and better and better. The bubble tips never looked different. They weren't affected whatsoever, but the sea bay was going downhill. That's it, guys. We have gotten to the end of the stream. It is 2.5 hours in. There's 242 of us here. I want to thank all of you for tuning in this Saturday. I hope that you found the water change station topic interesting. If you're not subscribed to this channel, please do. I'm assuming you are, because you probably got a notification. We do this every Saturday unless I'm traveling, and I always try to share with you some kind of good information, throw in some stories, answer your questions. The whole point of this is to be successful with our reef tanks. So thank you very much for listening. I will see you guys again next Saturday at 2 o'clock, which is Texas time or Central time. Bye, guys.